Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Naruto was in the world of a women and harem with all? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the stringed man for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story. Link in the description. Excerpt from the Sage of Six Paths, Part 1, Chakra. For as long as I remember, ever since the time of my own mother and even the Jubi, chakra has always been a strange form of energy. From what I could tell, it courses through every living being in the world, but is more prominent in women. I myself as a woman can attest to that. What I do not understand is why this energy is so weak within males. It is a strange conundrum to me, but I fear that I may have other problems to worry about. For now, I will try and find out why this is the case. Haguroma Atsutsuki, Kanahigakure. One of the strongest hidden villages in the ninja world with some of the most powerful kunoichi in the world. Among those was the current and fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze. She sat at her chair in her office overlooking the village she has protected since she first became a ninja way back when. Her long, golden hair and speed gave her the nickname of the Yellow Flash back during the war, and she has proven that she is among the most powerful ninjas in the village. Unfortunately, even she, with all of her power, her strength and speed, could not escape two things: paperwork and her wife, Kushina. It had been a very hectic time after the Kyuubi attack 6 years ago. Right after the birth of her twins, Naruto and Aoki, a mysterious woman in a mask grabbed the newborn girl of the two. Minato wanted to save her child and successfully did. The only problem was that the masked woman was able to release the Kyuubi from Kushina's seal in the process. Minato had no choice but to seal the Kyuubi, but she had to do it in parts. The Yin chakra went into her eldest daughter at the time, the 3-year-old Natsumi, the Yang chakra in Aoki, and the soul was placed in a seal far away from the village. This effectively ended the Kyuubi's destruction, and subsequently ended the Kyuubi itself. After announcing that her two daughters were the Jinuriki for the fox, the entire village was in celebration. Their hero had saved them at the cost of making her own daughter's sacrifices. The hectic part was the council and pretty much everyone in the village wanting the two girls to start training immediately. It was getting a little out of hand now. Right now, Minato leaned back in her chair and placed her hands on her face. She tried to wake herself up only to really feel even more tired. Screw it. The Hokage stood up, revealing her muscular frame behind a white coat and a standard outfit on, and stretched. She placed her hands in a familiar cross-like position and said, Kagebushin no Jutsu. A clone of herself appeared and looked to her creator before looking towards the paperwork. It sighed before looking back to see that said creator was waving at it. Suddenly, Minato was gone in a flash of yellow. In only a few seconds, Minato was back at her home. It wasn't really extravagant or fancy. It was a simple, 2-story home that just looked ordinary. She sighed in relief and walked inside to the sound of dinner being made and laughter being done. She walked through the entrance hall, removing her sandals in the process, and made her way to the living room. There she saw her little girls playing together. Aoki was almost a mirror image of Kushina. Red hair that sprawled out to her shoulders, light blue eyes, a slender-like frame with not too many muscles, and 2 whisker marks on each cheek. She was a bit of a troublemaker at some points, pulling pranks and such, but it was all in good fun and no harm. The eldest of the 3 was Natsumi. She had blonde hair that was actually straight like her mother's hair. Her eyes were also the same as Kushina's, and she had 3 whisker marks on each cheek. She currently is just doing some E-rank jutsus in front of Aoki just to really show them off. She wasn't really what you would call arrogant, but she liked to consider herself very strong. Minato shook her head and turned to the kitchen where she saw her wife and son at work. Naruto, her only son, was a pretty normal boy like most in the village. Since he couldn't use chakra like they could, he usually just helped Kushina with the housework and such. He had spiky blonde hair and bright blue eyes to boot, making most kunoichi swoon at how cute he was. Naruto was a bit of an enigma of sorts. He was good at everything that didn't involve the ability to be a ninja at the young age of 6. He could cook, clean, sew, sing, dance, draw, is a good shot with both archery and shurikens, and he's just all around a sweet boy. Most kunoichi knew him as being the only son of the 4th Hokage, but the ones closest to the family knew him as the sweetest boy in the elemental nations. Minato smiled as she saw her son and her wife hard at work. So, what's for dinner? She spoke up, getting their attention. Mommy! Aoki shouted out as she ran towards Minato and hugged her tightly. Hey there, Aoki. Minato picked her up and twirled her around for a few seconds before stopping. And how's my princess doing in her castle tonight? Aoki gave a big-toothed smile. I'm doing fine, Mommy. Natsumi was just showing me some cool jutsu she learned. Oh, is that so? Minato walked over as she saw Natsumi smile towards her and scratched the back of her head sheepishly. Minato simply chuckled a bit and ruffled up her blonde hair. Guess it's not all that bad then, as long as you're not showing her anything dangerous. Thanks, Mom. Natsumi spoke up. Minato, Kushina started as she went to her wife with that smile on her face. Minato paled a bit as she knew that smile meant bad news for her. Don't tell me that you decided to cut out on your duties early again, did you? Minato stammered a bit as she tried to come up with a good excuse this time. Almost as if her silent prayer was answered, Naruto walked in, carrying a pot of beef stew in his small hands. I finished the stew, Mom. He said with a bright smile that melted both Kushina's and Minato's hearts. For a child who would catch other kunoichi's eyes, it was hard not to see why. From his absolute adorable and smooth face, that charming and innocent smile he gave others, the way he treated everyone with kindness, even the sometimes when he fixed some of the family friends' food for their long journeys outside of the village. He was just a nice kid just in general, and every kunoichi just loved that about him. Couldn't say the same about the men of the village though. To the men, this boy had caught the attention of almost every woman within the village walls, and it irritated them enough to actually try and attack the boy on 1 or 2 occasions when he was out and about for a few minutes. Luckily for him though, Kasumi, the last student of the Yondaime, was always there to protect him. After the second attempt, the group of men were sent to Anko and Ibuki, the 2 heads of the TI department, to see a just punishment for almost attacking a child. The Hokage's child no less. Minato smiled back to her son, thankful that his cuteness distracted Kushina long enough to hopefully forget this whole situation. Hopefully. The family gathered around the table to eat the delicious food. Naruto and Kushina made a beef stew, pork chops, vegetable soup and biscuits. As they ate, it was just as peaceful inside of the house as it was outside into the village. Since it was getting late, it only made sense for most people to turn in for the night, or at the very least get inside their homes. In one building was a small group of around 12 men who've been getting cock-blocked by a 6-year-old for years now. These were simply just some civilians who were sick of not being able to get any action with some of the most attractive women in all of the elemental nations. Those like Kasumi Hatake, Anko Mitarashi, Karina Yuhi, Meito Gaya, Hana Inuzuka, even Asuna Saratobi weren't even remotely interested in any of the men in the village, and instead more interested in this child. Sure, this would be very petty of them, but some felt like this was a last resort, especially Mizuki. The man really wanted a piece of that snake woman, and not Orochimaru. The plan was rather simple really. The first step was to find the right kunoichi to snatch the boy. After that, the boy will be out of the way for them to make a move. Now then, Mizuki started with a sick grin to his face. Despite not having any chakra just like every other man, Mizuki was charismatic and rallied the men together for this one purpose tonight. I've already sent out the letter to the kunoichi we hired about the security for the North Gate. They'll be able to infiltrate the village, avoid the guards for a time, and make it to the Hokage's home to take that little bastard right from under everyone's noses. When that happens, she'll take him far away from the village and ensure he won't be a problem anymore for all of us. As Mizuki was explaining this, the others nodded in agreement. These men were more or less like sheep when it came to following Mizuki's plan, all too willing to let a potential enemy into their home all just to get their ass wet. The men left their meeting place all the while being watched by a certain, silver-haired Umbu woman wearing a dog mask. She was tall, curvy in the right areas, and was eyeing these particulars specifically. Why? Because these were some of the exact men who nearly attacked her favorite blonde boy on 2 occasions. She saved Naruto both times and even requested to keep watch on these men all the while still being able to perform her own duties. Of course, Minato was all too happy to have her keep watch on these men since their trip to the TI department did little to curb their anger towards Naruto. As Kasumi Hatake, the copycat kunoichi, watched them, she couldn't help but feel a very disturbing presence coming to Naruto. That boy was precious to many of the kunoichi in the village. Not only was he just the most adorable child in general, but he made them all feel special in a way. He would make a fine husband in the future since he could do a lot right now as a 6-year-old. It only made them all wonder how he would be when he grew older and really started to pay attention to the women in his life. As Kasumi left to follow them, a kunoichi at the north gate was getting ready to strike, and this target would be personnel for her and her once great village. Excerpt from the Sage of Six Paths. Part 2, Chakra Manipulation. Ninjutsu, Genjutsu, Fuinjutsu, Kenjutsu, even Taijutsu. The manipulation of chakra flow to use these techniques is fairly simple from most women's perspectives. To be able to manipulate one's chakra is the key to success within the ninja world, yet this is something that males cannot do. Since their chakra flow is so weakened, they lack the ability to manipulate their actual chakra. This means that they cannot use the techniques we can, meaning they couldn't defend themselves against the kunoichi even they wanted to. Interesting, but it won't last forever. Haguroma Otsutsuki. As the night was deep within the Leaf Village, Naruto was sleeping peacefully within his bed at his home. In his dreams he had this idea of wanting to have the strength to protect the people he cared about, and even protecting the village itself. Naruto always had this desire to be able to do more than what he could currently do. All his life, he was only able to do so much as he was just a boy in a world where women had the power and ultimately the final say. It always worried him if one day he got horrible news that one of his precious people fell on a mission. He knows how difficult the life of a kunoichi could be, and it terrified him to think that one day his sisters would be living that life themselves. The blonde had always dreamed of one day being able to help not only his sisters that he loved with all his heart, but also everyone else in the village. Even the men that gave him cold glares that he really knew nothing about. He was just too kind-hearted for his own good at times. Oh well, he thought he might as well do everything in his power to help his precious people, whether that was just cooking, sewing up their clothes or just spending time with them in general to brighten up their day. While Naruto slept off those thoughts and went into a blissful sleep, he was unaware of someone outside of his window, watching him with a keen eye. This kunoichi was keeping her eye on the boy as he was her target those men hired her for. She remembered how those fools approached her with this job. They supposedly took a trip out of their village and made their way to hers to sightsee. Since they were males, not many people paid any attention to them. They stayed for a few days until they began to ask if there was any kunoichi who would take a small job from them. Her curiosity piqued as she approached the group in a bar, and they told her of what they wanted her to do. Safe to say, this woman's grin grew at who she was tasked with taking. The masked woman peeked through the glass window, thankful that the boy's room was on the first floor for easy access. Those men really did their research. Not only had they provided excellent detail of the guards' rounds at the gates, they also were able to provide her with a description of the house and where the boy's room was. They were good at gathering information in her opinion, but that was going to get them killed in the future, that she knew. As she carefully used her ninja wire to reach in through the small crack of the window frame to unlock it, she noticed how similar to the yondaime the boy looked. His hair and his face reminded her so much of the fourth that it was eerie in a sense. Once the window was unlocked, she silently opened it up and went inside. The room was nothing really all that special aside from toys placed all over the floor. It wasn't too messy to be a problem, which was good for the kunoichi as it meant it would be no problem getting in and out. She made her way to the bed of the boy and looked him over carefully in the dim light of the full moon through the window. Aside from the features of the yondaime, the boy just had a cute aura about him. She couldn't help but want to touch his cheek and caress him in her arms. For a brief moment, she was actually regretting what she was about to do and wanted to leave before he had a chance to wake, but that was not going to be the case. Naruto stirred in his sleep and slowly opened his eyes as the last thing he saw before things went black for him again was a headband with the familiar symbol for a Wagakure on it. Elsewhere, Anko Mitarashi, the teen snake mistress of Konoha and one of the most frightening kunoichi within Konoha, not including her former sensei or her boss Ibiki, was back from her mission a week earlier than expected. Despite the fact that she should be excited to be back so early, it didn't help that she was also tired. Taking out Rouge kunoichi was a tiring job, especially when they have a decent strategy on how to deal with you at least for a few minutes. Anko stretched her limbs out as she was making her way back home to throw off her clothes and lay on her comfortable bed. Oh, natural. That was one of her guilty pleasures, really, in the hopes that someone would be ballsy enough to join her like that, especially her favorite little blonde boy. That thought alone was enough to make her blush. Maybe when he gets a little older, she thought to herself as she immediately began to think of an older, more muscular Naruto without a shirt on. Her blush intensified as she giggled like a schoolgirl for a moment. That was all interrupted when she caught a brief glimpse of something yellow moving fast in the darkness. What the? She started as she knew for a fact that her Hokage wouldn't be out this late without a reason. Anko decided to follow who she thought was her leader, and instantly a red flag went off in her mind. Even with a brisk jog, Minato Namikaze was still one of the fastest kunoichis within the ninja world. So why was she going so slow that even Anko could easily catch up to her with ease? Another red flag was when she saw how low to the ground the blonde hair was. Minato was tall, so why hunch so heavily? It didn't make any sense, until the moonlight shined down onto them and Anko gasped in horror. It was an IWA kunoichi dressed in all black, wearing a mask and carrying an unconscious Naruto under her arm. Instantly seeing red, Anko rushed even faster toward the woman who dared to hurt and take away her favorite blonde. "Hey you bitch!" Anko shouted out as she rushed over, catching the IWA nin's attention. Said woman gasped as she recognized the famed snake mistress, and instantly clenched her teeth in frustration. Thinking fast, she pulled out a kunai and held it to Naruto's neck, instantly stopping the purple-haired teen. She saw how Anko reacted and raised a brow briefly under her mask. Seems this boy is indeed special to this kid, she thought before gaining another idea. Bring your Hokage outside of your village, or this boy dies right here and now. Not wanting to take any chances, Anko had to relent and watched as the IWA kunoichi rushed out to the gate. She gritted her teeth and quickly made her way to inform the Hokage of the terrible news she would have to convey. With Kasumi, the copycat kunoichi continued to follow those men, watching them disperse one by one until only Mizuki was left. Personally, Kasumi hated this man as he had tried to hurt Naruto more than just the group did. She would love nothing more than to end the man right here and now for all he had tried to do to Naruto for a few years now, and her sensei would gladly allow her to, but that damn civilian council continues to interfere in kunoichi business. It irked her to no end how those bastards continued to get in the way of ninja affairs. She sighed as she saw Mizuki walk into his home and had to resist the urge to go in there right then and there. It would be oh so easy. Just as Kasumi stood up to leave, she saw out of the corner of her eye a head of purple running towards her sensei's home. Raising her brow, she leapt over to the familiar snake mistress and landed in front of the teen. Anko stopped in her tracks and panted heavily as she saw Kasumi. "Anko, what's wrong?" Kasumi asked in her usual, calm tone as she put her hands in her pockets. Anko looked at Kasumi and caught her breath long enough to explain everything that has happened so far. Safe to say, Kasumi's one visible eye widened, and she knew her sensei would not like this. Not at all. With Naruto. Naruto had awoken from his forced sleep a few minutes later, feeling the wind rushing past him in the process. He had felt this type of rush before when one of his mothers would take him and his sisters out for a run. Those are some great memories he shared with them, though he had no idea why he was out here in the forest at night. How did I get here? He thought to himself as he looked and saw a dark-clad kunoichi carrying him under her arm like a toy. His arms were tied behind his back and his feet were bound by the ankles. His brain began to slowly put everything together as what happened in his room hit him like a fist to the face. Holy crap! She kidnapped me. The woman noticed the shifting under her arm and looked down to see her target staring right up at her with those beautiful, ocean blue eyes. For a second, her heart skipped a beat as she looked at him and actually took in his features for the first time. His slightly tanned and completely smooth skin, spiky sun-kissed hair that was like Minato's but smoother, and those eyes of his, innocent and afraid yet somehow still filled with kindness even in his current position. The kunoichi had to quickly look away from him as she could easily see why that teen stopped in her tracks earlier. Naruto wanted to struggle at first, to try and break free from this woman's grasp and make a run for it. Only problems with that was, she was a highly trained kunoichi who was faster than he was, They were moving at some pretty high speeds on the treetops, and he would just wind up falling to his possible death. And then there was the fact that he really didn't want to test this woman right now. He sighed as he had no choice but to watch where they were heading towards and tilted his head a bit. He recognized this place as she landed in a clearing with one object in the center on a small, raised platform. The platform was made of stone and had many different seals etched into the floor by powerful fire jutsus. In the center of the platform, large, black boulder with a spiral-like seal also etched into by the same flames. Naruto recognized this area as a forbidden zone for most of the people of Konoha, kunoichi or not. He remembered hearing his mom, and Kushina will be referred to as mother while Minato will be mom. Got that? Cool. Speak of the dangerous Kyuubi being sealed in this very area all those years ago. He didn't know much, but it was probably a very bad idea for them to be here. The kunoichi went over to the platform and set Naruto down as roughly as she could without hurting him too badly. She started to pace as she looked off into the distance where Konoha was. She didn't care about the money anymore. She just wanted to ensure that the fourth suffered for what she did. Naruto sat up on his own and was able to sit on the edge of the platform, watching the woman pace with anticipation in each step she took. Not fully understanding anything just yet, Naruto decided to speak up. He began as she stopped for a moment, and turned her head towards him. Why are you doing this, miss? The woman looked away from him as she heard how calm and peaceful his voice sounded. Because I was hired to do so. She answered him, not sure why as she continued to pace. Apparently you have some spineless men in your village that seek your death in a way. That caught Naruto's attention, and he sighed in mild annoyance. That stopped her again. Sounds like that Mizuki guy and his group again. Not the first time those guys tried something drastic. The kunoichi stopped once again and looked right at the annoyed child. You mean they've had you kidnapped before? Naruto chuckled a bit, and gave the woman a big toothed smile that she actually blushed under her mask. Nah. Sometimes they would try and bribe some people in the village to do so or try and catch me themselves. One time they actually caught me and put me in a box then sent me down river. I wound up in a small village for about a day before Kasumine and a squad Anbu found me. Naruto started to laugh under his breath at the memory. Did those men face any sort of punishment? The woman asked, genuinely curious as to what happened afterwards as she stood in front of him. Naruto stopped his laugh and answered her. Sort of. The civilian council gave them a year on probation. My mom was super pissed and tried to get those guys arrested, but it was technically a civilian issue, so mom couldn't do anything. Naruto looked up to her with a smile. Wasn't all that bad. Now I have a few friends in that village I visit sometimes with my mother. The woman stifled a chuckle as she knelt down to look him in the eyes. That sounds terrible that those men did that. If I had known they held that much malice towards you, I probably wouldn't have accepted this job. Naruto could tell she was feeling uneasy. It was kinda like a skill he had towards others. Always able to tell when a person was feeling sad, or upset, or even conflicted. He would call it his own personal ninja sense just to get on Natsumi's nerves sometimes. He looked at how she didn't look him in the eyes or how she was shifting her hands all around her. She was nervous, that much he could tell. Is there another reason you took this job, miss? Naruto asked as he wanted to at least know who his kidnapper was. The woman looked back to him, and saw those eyes once again. How they were simply asking her name, and why she was doing what she was doing. The woman had no idea what came over her as she sighed and removed her mask, letting her black hair flow out. She had fair skin and brown eyes as she looked at Naruto with a look of regret. Aika. She spoke up. Just call me Aika. Naruto smiled to Aika and asked her. So why did you take this job, Miss Aika? It's because of what your Hokage did to my village. She started as she actually sat down next to Naruto, and continued. During the war, she came onto the battlefield and wiped out our entire platoon in a matter of minutes. She took away our spirit and will to fight as we were forced to see our home surrender to her. Aika clenched her fist as she remembered that day in all its entirety. She was staring forward with a hard scowl on her face. Naruto could tell something far deeper than a simple defeat must have set Aika off to do this whole kidnapping thing. But what was it? Naruto had heard more from the war from Ika than he had from his parents or any of his older kunoichi friends like Kasumi or Kurenai. Maybe he needed to find the root of Ika's problem. Miss Ika, Naruto started while Ika just continued to look forward with that scowl. That's when he noticed something briefly shine on her neck. What's that? She turned towards him and a silver necklace with lockets spilled out of her top. Ika immediately grabbed it and placed it back in her top. It's nothing. That's when Naruto got it. Losing the war to my mom isn't the only reason you have my mom, is there, Miss Ika? She didn't answer him, and instead continued to look away from him. You lost someone important to you, didn't you? Ika sighed as she turned to face him once more, one lone tear going down her face. I lost my wife in that battle. Naruto went wide-eyed as he couldn't even imagine the kind of pain she was in. It explains why she would risk capture or even death just to make his mom suffer a bit. Looking down for a moment as he wished he could do something to help her, Naruto thought of all the people he was fortunate enough to know and never wanted to see them in pain or worse, dead. The very thought made him feel sick to his stomach. He didn't want any of them to suffer and would do whatever he could to help them. It was at that moment he made up his mind. He was going to be a doctor and save the lives of those precious to him. Maybe his godmother could help with that. Back to the here and now, Naruto looked up to Ika with the same gentleness she had seen before, but now there was a fire in them. A determination she had never seen any man, let alone a child, do. It reminded her of some people that had earned her respect throughout the war. It was truly eerie to her. Miss Ika, Naruto started. I may not know much about what happened to you during the Kunoichi War, or what my mom did completely, but what I do know is that I don't believe your wife would want you to do this. Ika widened her eyes for a second as he continued. Do you really think she would want you to do something like this? Those words hit Ika hard. Was this what her wife would have wanted? Is this really the proper way to seek revenge? It was a war after all, and unfortunately people die in war. Was Ika right for openly seeking revenge though against Minato like this? What was she doing here? Why was she so filled with a lust for revenge in any way possible? Was this what her wife would have really wanted? Ika let the tears flow as she clutched the locket in her hands tightly. She remembered how kind her wife was back then, and how she would probably give Ika an earful if she continued with this. Naruto saw how Ika was beginning to relax and was actually smiling at how she was letting her emotions flow out. He was happy to see her really contemplating what to do and question if it was right. Hopefully when everyone got here, no blood would be shed. Naruto! A loud and easily recognizable voice yelled out. Both Ika and Naruto turned toward the voice and saw an angry Minato staring daggers into the woman who kidnapped her only son. All around the clearing were Umbi units, and even a few jounin to ensure that Ika couldn't escape. I don't know who you are, nor do I care. Minato started low as she began to walk forward, slowly. But you placed your hands on my son, for that you die. She spoke those last words with an intense fire in her eyes. Ika, in her emotional distress from not only her confession to Naruto, but also the fear from seeing the Hokage like this, grabbed Naruto and held a kunai to his neck. Everyone stopped as they didn't want to risk Naruto getting hurt. Miss Ika. Naruto started, distress clear in his voice. Don't do this. This isn't the way. Ika didn't say anything as she stood on the platform and stared daggers at Minato's concerned face. Let him go, Minato demanded. Your quarrel is with me, Iwanin. Leave my son out of this. The fire in her eyes from earlier was gone now, replaced with fear. I'm sorry, kid. Ika started as her tears hit his face. Naruto looked up to her and saw how afraid she was, how desperate and terrified her brown eyes were, and shuddered as the kunai began to move across his skin. Pain, an intense pain washed over Naruto as he felt the kunai slash his neck wide open. Fresh blood poured out and he couldn't breathe, each gasp for air sending more and more blood out and splashing onto him and the platform. Naruto looked out to see the horrified eyes of his mom and few other kunoichi around her. He saw tears as he was let go to fall onto the floor, and for the first time in a long time, he saw his mom cry. He had seen it once and promised her that he would never let her cry ever again, that he would protect her as well as his mother, Natsumi and Aoki, so they never would cry. Now here he was, the reason for her tears to fall. Everything seemed to move in slow motion now as Naruto fell to the floor, his blood still pouring from his open wound. Aika was sobbing as she fell to her knees, completely broken from what she had done. Minato in tears as she ran towards the platform to get to her son. Kasumi and Gaia rushing forward to kill Aika for what she had done. All Naruto could do was close his eyes as he could feel his left leaving him. The feeling of death was strange to the child. He felt empty, weightless, and yet for some reason he also felt at peace despite the fact he shouldn't be. It was all foreign feeling to him that he didn't know how to describe. Little did he know, the blood on the platform had started to sink into the seals and rise into the large stone seals. Oh! A dark and feminine voice spoke up as she could feel the life force of a proper sacrifice was finally given to her. Finally. Now, who is my vessel this time? The voice closed its eyes and focused as she saw the body of the boy bleeding to death from a slash in the neck. Wait! A boy? The entity gasped in surprise at first, then a sinister smile spread onto its large mouth. Interesting. She started as she accepted the blood and began to fade away from her dark prison. I can't wait to speak to this new vessel. This, she thought for a moment before her grin grew. Kid. And with that, she disappeared, eager to see where this boy takes her. Minato was in a pure rage when she had seen this IWA knee near her son. She swore if that woman even laid a small bruise on Naruto that she would send this Nin back to IWA in a box. That fire and rage was imminent in her eyes and her body language up until now. Now, all she felt was an intense pain in her chest as she was holding on to her lifeless child as her former student Kasumi held the IWA Nin by the back of the hair. There was no fight in her at all. Naruto. She sobbed out as everyone present could do nothing but watch in disbelief. Minato hugged her son as she could still feel the blood seeping onto her clothes. Nobody said a word as they heard the Hokage, the most powerful kunoichi in the entire village, sob. They were all too distracted to notice that the seals on the platform and stone had slowly vanished along with the blood. That all changed though when the stone cracked with loud sound. Everyone turned to it quickly, even Minato, and saw the stone begin to leave fissures within itself as the cracks began to spread all throughout it. Red chakra began to seep through the cracks. An all too familiar red chakra to most of the kunoichi there. Oh no. Minato spoke silently to herself before turning to the others around. Everyone, get back! Everyone did so, though Kasumi had forgotten about Aika as her fear of the returning Kyuubi was far more prevalent in her mind at the moment. Aika was consumed by the red chakra that was coming out of the stone, accepting death, as she had just given up after killing the boy who talked to her. All she could think about was how disappointed her wife would be if she ever got the chance to see her in the afterlife. Minato had picked up Naruto in her arms and attempted to flee as well, but that was when the chakra erupted from the stone and red tendrils quickly grabbed at Naruto. Minato, fearing for her son's body, was shocked at first, but then struggled to pull Naruto away. The tendrils were too strong as they pulled Naruto's body away from Minato, and even struck her in the stomach, forcing her back in the process. Naruto was pulled into the pool of red chakra and an explosion erupted, sending a large pillar of red energy high into the air for all to see, and certain people to feel. Konoha, Namake's home. Both Natsumi and Aoki along with Kushina were standing in their living room, looking out the window as they witnessed what everybody else witnessed. A large pillar of red energy flying into the air. Kushina instantly knew that area as the seals the Kyuubi's soul resided inside of and tensed. She was just about to run out to help secure the seals with her Fuinjutsu and pray that her son and wife were okay, but that was when she stopped at the sounds of two thuds behind her. Kushina quickly turned to see both her daughters writhing in pain on the floor, convulsing. Natsumi! Aoki! Kushina yelled out in distress as she rushed towards the two, her motherly instincts on overdrive. She knelt to them and cradled the two as she didn't know what was going on with them. As they both convulsed in Kushina's arms, she could do nothing but sob and pray that her family would be alright after tonight. Unbeknownst to her though, the seals on the two had glowed a faint blue color before disappearing. A stronger bond was formed. Suna, a little red-haired girl with the kanji for love over her left eye, had just finished killing yet another assassin wannabe as per usual. This had been the fifth, she thought, attempt this week, and it was starting to get on her nerves. Not only had she not been able to sleep and exhausted from that, but she also had to live on her own after killing her aunt. Her mother didn't want anything to do with her, and her two older sisters were kept far away from her as well by their mother. It was all fairly sad for the girl, but at least she still had her sanity, though that was slowly slipping away from her as well with each passing day. She sat on a rooftop and stared up at the clear night sky, wondering why everyone hated her and wanted her dead so much. She sighed as a lone tear was shed from her eye as she felt alone. That was when she saw a very faint tint of red far off beyond the sands of Wind Country. What in the was all she could get out before she felt a jolt of pain coursing through her body. She fell to the ground and let out a silent scream. This feeling was entirely new to her, as she had never experienced pain before. The sands always kept her safe no matter what, but this was different. The sands began to convulse all around her as the monster inside of her shouted out in pain as well. It was loud at first, but began to gradually fade away from the girl's mind as the seal over her stomach glowed a faint blue before vanishing. Once that happened, the pain in the voice was gone from her and she passed out, experiencing sleep for the very first time. Peace of mind was achieved. Kiri, two individuals were walking along the village of streets tonight. One was shorter than the other, and had gray hair that almost covered her right eye. Speaking of eyes, she had pink, pupilless eyes and a stitch-like scar under her left eye. The other girl was fairly tall, and had long brown hair and eyes. She was smiling softly at the other girl who seemed to be upset at something and looking away from her. I believe that you'll make a fine Mizukage one day. The taller girl spoke to the other in a soft tone. The shorter girl sighed and hardened her eyes. Not unless every one of those people dropped dead right now. She spoke with a harshness in her tone that caused the other girl to wince a bit. I will become the next Mizukage, and I will tear them all apart. She didn't get very far as she along with the other girl each felt pain on an unimaginable level. They both fell to the ground convulsing violently as their seals glowed that faint blue color. It left them and they both passed out right in the middle of the street. Fortunately, a teenager with auburn hair and green eyes saw the two fall and went to take them to the hospital in concern for their health. A trio was created. IWA. Two teenage chunin were being held down by their fellow kunoichi of their village. They were being forced to kneel in front of their Tsuchikage as per every mission report they were to deliver. They did not resist because of the seals forced upon them to demand loyalty by their old kage. They were unfortunately used to this now. One was fairly tall with red hair tied into a topknot. She had dark eyes and wore the standard armor for an IWA chunin. Beside her was her tall friend wearing red armor and a face mask that covered her mouth. The only thing visible was her brown eyes. Both of you have done your job well. The old kage spoke to them with her usual sneer. Now then, leave my sight and get back to your post. I have no further use for you two at the moment. Hi, Tsuchikage-sama. They both said in unison as they were forcefully pulled up and led out of the room. Once they were out of the building, they were left alone by the sneering kunoichis there and went back to their small hut outside of the village. As they sat down and relaxed, the first girl gritted her teeth and put her fist through the table they were sitting at. The second girl didn't even flinch when that happened. Damn it. The first spoke in a low tone as she started to calm down a bit. I'm sick of this. I know. The second spoke in a monotone voice. I am too. They both felt an unusual pain sweep through their bodies. This was different than the seal the old Tsuchikage had on them for obedience. This was pain on a whole other level. Try as they might, they eventually succumbed to the pain and fell to the ground, writhing uncontrollably. Their seals glowed a faint blue and destroyed the obedience seals on their bodies. They passed out once the glow faded. A rogue duo was born. Kumo. Right now, both A and her little sister had returned from a mission that was supposed to take a day at most to finish. They had returned a week later, which was something very odd to the Raikage. The two had returned and while left to report back to the Raikage, her sister, a fairly tall, dark-skinned teen with white hair and shades, left to find her own team. As she walked on, she ignored some of the glares and leers from the villagers. This was normal for her and her friend as they had both been hated by the village for what they carried, though none of them would ever do anything about it for fear of the Raikage and especially the future Raikage. The teen had seen her friend and waved with an enthusiastic smile as she sped over towards her. The blonde-haired, dark-eyed girl waved as well as the teen raced over towards her. Suddenly, They both fell to the ground in pain as the first girl skidded towards the second. Their seals glowed blue and faded, causing them to pass out. That was when A showed back up and rushed towards her sister in panic. A powerful duo was assembled. Taki, a little girl with mint-colored hair, tan skin and orange, pupilless eyes, was running for her life on the streets of Taki. An angry mob was chasing her, as they wanted nothing more than to kill the demon of the village once and for all. The little girl continued running, tears running down her face as she ran, and turned into a familiar alleyway. She managed to slip into one of her many hiding spots that she had all around the village. She crawled deeper and deeper until she made it into a large cocoon that had an opening to it. There was a blanket and a lantern inside the cocoon, and curled up into a ball to sob her eyes out. "Why?" she cried. "Why is everyone like this to me?" Her fear of the people was very well known as the kunoichi of the village, and even the civilians always treated her like trash. They knew that she couldn't do anything about it, lest she be punished by the village head. No one wanted to help her as they all viewed her to be just a demon that causes nothing but pain and suffering to others. The girl wanted to leave, she wanted to escape many times, but every time she tried, she would always be captured and punished severely. "I don't want to be here anymore," she spoke to herself as she curled her knees to herself even more. "I just want to." Next thing she knew, her body was in pain. She convulsed as the cocoon did the same. Her seal glowed blue and then vanished, causing her to pass out. Fear was overcomed. The seal, Minato, and the other stared in horror and fear as the large beam of energy began to fade away. They all watched with bated breath as the platform and the stone were no more and left a crater in its place. The smoke was beginning to clear and Minato rushed over towards the crater, praying to Kami-sama that her son's body was alright at least. She was followed by Kasumi and Gaia as well as a few Umbu. The moment they reached the edge of the crater, they all went wide-eyed at what they saw at the bottom. Laying there unconscious and naked as the day he was born, was Naruto with Aika also nude laying next to him. He seemed uninjured as he laid on his back, the slash on his neck completely healed and leaving a scar. The reason they all were in shock was the way he looked now. For one, his usual spiky blonde hair was now smooth and long, reaching all the way to his mid-back. It was now blonde with red roots coming out of his scalp and fox ears coming out of the top. He now had 3 whisker marks on both sides of his cheeks and a seal on his chest. His muscles were more pronounced, and he even had abs. Most of the women had to tear their eyes away from those and accidentally got a look at his rather impressive and flaccid member. This caused them all to blush hard and a few even had horrible nosebleeds that sent them flying. Kasumi was among them with Gaia following suit. Though, the thing that really took Minato aback was the red tail coming out of Naruto's lower back. It was large enough to wrap around him once and looked far too much like the Kyuubi's tail. She then saw Aika and noticed she had changed drastically. Her black hair was now much longer and a deep crimson and even had fox ears coming out of the top like Naruto. Her skin was tan now, and she had a tail coming out of her lower back the same color as her hair. She had some kind of seal on her left breast which both looked slightly larger than before. Speaking of bodies, her body was much curvier than before. Minato looked at both and saw they were both breathing. She sighed in relief at first, and then went down to check on her son. She didn't care that he was nude right now or even the small changes. All she cared about was that he was alive again. She knelt down to him and held him close to her chest as she smiled, hearing his breathing steady. "Hokage-sama." An Umbu with a Nico mask approached and spoke in a distraught tone. Minato looked up to her as Nico seemed to be panicking. She never panicked. "What's wrong, Nico?" Minato spoke in a calmer tone than before as she covered her son in her coat. She really didn't like how some of her kunoichi were staring at her son's rather large member. Even she blushed a bit when she saw it. Nico regained her composure as she answered her leader. Both Aoki and Natsumi were placed in the hospital not too long ago. Minato's eyes widened. Lady Kushina said something happened with their seals. Minato quickly stood up and issued her orders as she picked Naruto up bridal style. "Kasumi, Gaia, take this woman to Ibiki in the TI department. Make sure that you all get any and every bit of information out her, and I mean everything." The two nodded, both recovered from their nosebleed rockets, and quickly took Aika's unconscious body away. "The rest of you, secure the area and make sure no one else enters here. I'll be back. Hi, Hokage-sama. The rest all answered as Minato left in a shunshin. She appeared at the hospital and quickly rushed in, ensuring that nobody saw the state Naruto was in. She rushed through and quickly found Kushina in a room where both of their daughters now lay in the beds in. Kushina rushed over and hugged Minato before noticing their son, Naruto. Oh my baby beau, she stopped mid-sentence as she saw the way he looked now. She stiffened as she saw the downcast look in Minato's eyes, a look that was never a good sign. We're going to need some help, Naruto's mindscape. A grumbling could be heard by the young boy as he was slowly opening his eyes. At first, there was nothing but a brightness that caused him to quickly shut his eyes, but then a shade hovered over him. He slowly opened his eyes again, and saw what looked like a hand held over him. It was slender, with slightly tanned skin and long red nails. Naruto followed the hand as he leaned back his head, noticing that he was situated on someone's lap. He was able to see the woman above him, and actually was in awe of her appearance. She had a curved face with deep crimson eyes, whisker marks on each cheek, long orange hair that went to her mid-back, and her tan skin that made her look completely exotic in the young boy's eyes. He then noticed the foxy grin she was showing him and blushed a bit when he noticed that she wasn't wearing any clothes. He quickly stood up from her lap and quickly covered his eyes. I'm so sorry, miss. He stammered out too quickly as he continued to cover his eyes. The woman chuckled a bit as she stood up and walked over towards the flustered boy. Don't know why you're covering your eyes, boy. She leaned down towards him and pulled his arms down. Naruto went wide-eyed as he saw her large bust mere inches away from his face. We're gonna get to know each other very well, Naruto. Naruto was able to tear his eyes away from her chest and looked up to her. He saw that same foxy grin, only this time her eyes held a genuineness to them. How do you know my name, miss? The woman stood upright, towering over the boy like any normal-sized woman would. I know a lot about you now, Naruto. Naruto looked up at her, puzzled by her words. Why you do? He asked hesitantly. The woman nodded to him and kept grin as she leaned down to him. When your blood came into contact with the seals, I knew everything about you now. Naruto tilted his head in confusion as she said those words. He had to think hard of what she meant. He remembered he was with Aika in that clearing, talking to her, but then when his mom showed up, Aika became very hostile. The last thing he remembered was her crying and saying that she was sorry. That was when, he gasped as his eyes went wide in shock. That was when the woman in front of him started to cackle as she stood up completely. That's right, Naruto. She slashed your throat wide open and all of that delicious and sweet blood poured all over my seal. She laughed out. Naruto then started to look around in a slight panic. Then where's Miss Aika? The woman calmed her, laughing down to answer him. You don't have to worry about your pet kit. She'll be fine. Naruto turned to her and raised a brow. She's not my pet. He had no idea what that meant in the context that the woman was talking about, but he at least knew she wasn't a cat or dog to him. The woman chuckled for a moment. I meant that now her life is tied to yours since she was caught in my little field for you as well. Meaning that she is yours to do with as you see fit. The woman could only chuckle once more at Naruto's bewildered expression. Truly this boy was indeed innocent beyond belief. Oh, she would enjoy showing him the joys of the female body when he grew older. He was already blushing from seeing her modesty right now as a child. She could only imagine what he would be like when he got older. Alright, enough with the jokes and down to business, Naruto. She started in a semi-serious tone. Your blood was the catalyst to my freedom. In a manner of speaking, at least. Freedom? Naruto asked her, as she knelt back down to him. That's right, Kit. Because of you, I'm at least free enough to be out of that damn stone. She looked him in the eye. And now I'm a part of you, and I know that you wish to get stronger. Why you do? She nodded. You wish to protect those close to you. Noble, but utterly pointless if you don't learn the right things. You mean like a kunoichi learns? He had a bit of glimmer in his eyes that took the woman aback for a brief moment. Cute. She thought before shaking her head to focus. That's right. You're gonna be a ninja, and with my help, you will be the most powerful warrior in the world. She stood up as 9 tails appeared from her lower back. And we will crush all enemies that dare to oppose us. Her voice sounded a bit evil to the young boy as he continued to watch her change into a large fox. And then we will rule all and crush anyone who oppose us. Her voice sounded demonic now as she began to cackle loudly once more from the thought of death and destruction. Actually I wanted to be doctor. Naruto spoke up in a whispered-like tone as she cackled, which stopped abruptly. The large fox looked down slowly towards Naruto. A what? She asked, surprised by his answer. Naruto sighed and looked up towards her, no fear in his eyes. I said I want to be a doctor and help people. He shouted up to her. The large fox raised a brow and lowered her head until she was practically right in his face. You want that instead of power? He nodded to her, trying to keep himself calm. The fox raised her head, slowly realizing that this boy was definitely different than any of her previous jailers that used her power for themselves. Maybe this kid could do something more with them. Okay then, Naruto. She spoke as she reverted back to her human-like form. I suppose I could assist you in that as well, but know that I don't want a weak vessel. I'll be putting you through the ground when I decide on when to train you. She went over to him and got in his face, causing him to flinch a bit as her bust almost hit him in the face. I don't want to hear any complaints when I train you, and if I do, then I'll make you deeply regret it. Got it? Okay. Naruto answered her in a modest tone. She stood up straight and was about to walk away. Actually, miss, what's your name? The woman stopped and for a moment was surprised by this boy again. None of the other jailers had ever asked her that question. Taking a breath to recompose herself, she turned with a grin on her face. I am the great Kyubi no Kitsune, demon lord of the underworld and most powerful bijou in existence. Naruto tilted his head, which caused her to nearly drop her harsh persona once more. Do I call you all of that then? She face faulted at hearing those words and how apparently serious Naruto asked. Getting back up, she yelled out. No, you idiot! Those are just my titles. Oh. He reacted as if he had figured something out that sounded wonderful. So what is your actual name? THQB sighed once more. It's Kurama. My real name is Kurama. Then it's nice to meet you, Miss Kurama. Naruto smiled towards her, and she quickly turned around to avoid his smiling gaze. Yeah, sure. Just wake up and leave already, kid. She spoke in a fast tone. Naruto raised a brow in confusion, until he felt his senses fade away and his vision getting dark. Tsunade's office. Right now, both Minato and Kushina were worried as they waited in the office of the head doctor at the hospital. Kushina was in her seat, terrified by what she saw when her little boy was brought in by her lover. Minato had explained what had happened earlier and Kushina was in absolute shock as she had no clue how that could have happened. Things got worse when Minato found out that both Natsumi and Aoki were both taken into the hospital by her wife, saying that the seal on them glowed briefly and they convulsed before passing out. Minato had no clue what any of this meant and was hoping that Tsunade could at least put her mind at ease for now. After a few minutes of agonized waiting, Tsunade came back into her office and was immediately bombarded by many questions from the concerned duo. She understood their fears and worries since she herself was also worried to death for her favorite little blonde, but that didn't stop her from chopping the two in their heads. She was already frustrated as it was and had a semi-hangover, so she really was not in the mood for too loud of voices. Tsunade recomposed herself as the two nursed their own sore heads and spoke up. From a medical standpoint, both Natsumi and Aoki are completely fine, more than fine actually. Forgetting about the bump atop of her head, Kushina went into what Minato referred to as supermom mode. What do you mean? Are my babies okay? Why did they pass out suddenly? Why aren't you telling me anything, Tsunade? A tick mark formed over the dirty blonde's head as she chopped Kushina on the head once again. If you would let me speak, then I could tell you? Minato picked her wife up from the floor and looked back to Tsunade. Tell us what happened to our children, Tsunade. Despite trying to put on a strong facade, Minato was worried to death. Who knows just what had happened to her children? Tsunade sighed. Well, like I was saying, physically the girls are just fine. In fact, I would say that they are healthier now than they've ever been. What do you mean? Minato asked her. I mean exactly that. Tsunade spoke up as she walked over to her desk and sat down in the chair. Remember when Aoki had to come in for a small infection in her lungs, or the time Natsumi had a severe fracture in her hip a few weeks ago? Both Minato and Kushina nodded, knowing that Natsumi's injury would keep her out of the academy this year. She was devastated about that news. Well, her hip is totally healed along with the infection in Aoki's lungs being completely eradicated from her body. Both Minato and Kushina went wide-eyed at this news. What does that mean, Tsunade? Kushina asked with a slight hint of panic and also relief in her voice. It means that whatever happened to Naruto at the seal must have somehow affected Natsumi and Aoki. I won't know too much until Jiraiya gets here and checks their seals. Tsunade answered her. Wait a minute. Minato started as she started to pace the floor. What about Naruto? The seal on his chest, even I've never seen anything like that before. That's why I need Jiraiya here, so she can at least help us figure out what's going on with that seal. Tsunade explained. Now about Naruto. Tsunade was interrupted when her assistant, Shizen, burst into the room, breathing heavily in the process. Lady Tsunade, Naruto is awake, she said in between breaths. What? All three women shouted out, making Shizen wince a bit. They didn't wait any longer and ran out of the office to get to the kids' shared room. As they were running down the halls, making sure not to hit anyone in the process, they could feel a warm chakra flow from the room they were heading to. It wasn't menacing or evil despite it clearly feeling like the Kyuubi's chakra, and instead it just felt warm and calming. Peaceful even. When they reached the door to the room, the chakra faded quickly, and then there was nothing. All three went inside with Kushina nearly ripping the door off its hinges only to see a fairly cute sight. On one bed, the one Naruto was on, all three children were seated there. Aoki was laying down on the large and fluffy red tail coming from Naruto's back. Natsumi was also laying on her stomach as she was playing with the tip of the tail and speaking to Naruto. Naruto was sitting up and had his arms propped behind him for support. He was all smiles as he watched his twin snuggling into his tail and his older sister playing with it. He was all smiles, which gave a good view to the three adults of his canines, and how sharp they looked now. The second that the three noticed their parents and godmother standing into doorway, they all beamed with absolute joy. Suna, Gaara, a red-haired little girl no older than 5, was laid down on a rooftop right after she saw that faint light off in the distance. Whatever happened out there had some sort of effect on her, as she fell unconscious. To anyone else in the village, especially the kunoichi there, it would be a time of panic. In fact, when another assassin tried her luck at killing the girl as ordered, she visibly panicked and immediately rushed over to hope the girl was dead. From what she was told, if the little girl fell asleep, then the demon would awaken and destroy the village with ease. The woman went over and turned the girl around, stunned at the steady breathing the little red head was doing, removing her face mask to reveal a lightly tan-skinned woman with red marks on the right side of her face while the left was completely covered by a flap of fabric from the top of her head. The woman went wide-eyed at the sight of the little girl asleep when she clearly wasn't supposed to be able to. I must inform the Kazekage, the woman frantically said as she left the area, continuously looking back over her shoulder out of fear the girl would rise up and kill her too. Gaara's mindscape. While the woman was leaving, Gaara opened her eyes to find herself in a desert of sorts. Though, this desert was unlike the sands of Suna or any desert she had ever seen. The sands were a pure white and flat, the sky was completely clear and a bright blue that seemed to shine a brightness with no heat. Gaara was in awe at what she was seeing and looked around before noticing a sand dune not too far off. Steeling her nerves, she walked over to the dune, hoping to get a much better view of her surrounding area. When she was close to it, she realized this dune began to move and then seemed to sink into itself. When that happened, Gaara could see that there was something forming from the white sands. At first it looked like a narrow tree, but upon a closer inspection, it was actually a woman. The sand finished shaping her, and she began to take form. She was the about average height and size all around, pale skin that matched the sand she was formed from, and a few purple markings over her breast and stomach. Her hair formed and was a smooth, sandy brown that went to her neck, but upon closer inspection was actually made out of sand. Clever. She opened her eyes and Gaara could see that they were a yellow color that held a bit of menace to them. Or maybe that was mischief, she couldn't really tell. So, the woman started with a grin, showing off her fang teeth. I guess it's finally time I met you officially, brat. Gaara started, pointing at the mysterious woman. What? She asked with a bit of annoyance in her tone. You know you're naked, right? Gaara spoke in an innocent tone. The woman looked down to herself and sure enough, she was nude, all out on display to the young girl. She blushed a bit as she tried covering herself with her hands and heard the little girl giggle at her. She scowled comically and began to shout out. Well, so are you, you damn brat. Gaara stopped her giggling fit and noticed that she was in fact also naked. She also tried covering herself, but instead of her hands doing so, the sands around them quickly formed around her and changed into the clothes she was wearing before. This amazed the two as Gaara stopped covering herself to look at herself. You couldn't even tell it was sand unless you touched it directly with, and even then the sand hardened and responded like real clothes. Also clever. Gaara looked up to the woman who was a little slack-jawed and smirked to her in a playful, mocking way. I guess you're the only one who's naked now, lady. The woman scowled at first, but then began to laugh hysterically. I guess you will be fun to be around, kid. She howled out in between laughs. This in turn caused Gaara to laugh a bit, the first sign of true happiness she had ever felt in her life. All right. The woman began as she recomposed herself from her fit of laughs. She then looked to Gaara with a smirk and spoke once more, not really caring about her nude form anymore. Gaara, we have a lot to talk about now. Gaara tilted her head a bit. How do you know my name, miss? And where exactly are we? She asked as she looked around the desert. Easy. The woman started as she held her hand and raised a finger. 1. My name is Shikaku, the Ichibi Tanuki, and the one-tailed Biju. She then held up a second finger. And 2. This place is your mind, where my seal resides in your body. Gaara looked around at the desert, and scratched her head sheepishly. Seems pretty barren, really. Shikaku grew a tick mark over her head and shouted. Well, whose fault is that now? You can control what this place looks like, so why don't you? Gaara started to think after Shikaku said that. I guess a few trees would be nice. No sooner did she think that did trees appear around them along with an oasis in the center where the sun came through. Wow, Gaara's widened in amazement at what she had just created. I know, right? Shikaku spoke up once more. Guess that's enough for now, kid. Gaara looked up to her and raised a brow. Shikaku grinned to her. Make sure not to tell anyone about this just yet. I'll be training you from now on. Really? Gaara asked, excitement in her eyes. Yeah, I know, I'm amazing. The still nude sand demon responded, earning a slight giggle from the redhead. For now, just get some sleep, kid, you've earned it. And with that, Gaara started to feel fatigue like never before. Her entire body relaxed and began to vanish from the desert, as she felt herself slipping into a blissful slumber for the first time in her life. IWA. It took some time, but soon enough, the two women in their small hut awoke with a fright of sorts. They quickly looked around to their surroundings to see they were still in their ragtag hut, and that they hadn't been moved for some time now. The tall girl in the red armor looked to her friend and vice versa. Hana. The second girl started towards the red-armored one now named Hana. Did the same thing happen to you too? Hana nodded. Yes, my tailed beast spoke to me. Something about being free and training of some sort. The first girl stood on shaky legs before inevitably sitting down in the chair still situated behind her. Yeah, mine said the same thing too. What do you think we should do, Roichi? Hana asked her friend as she too sat in her chair. Roichi leaned back and thought to herself. From what their Bijou told them, the seal on their bodies had disintegrated due to whatever happened to them earlier. There was no way they could stay here in IWA, as that old bitch would simply replace even more powerful seal upon them, or maybe even put them in breeding stocks with their chakra sealed up. That thought made Roichi grit her teeth in anger. They also couldn't just leave now without a plan, as then they would be hunted down as missing Nin. What exactly could they do? Why not fake your deaths? A voice spoke in her mind. Roichi opened her eyes as she heard the four-tailed monkey sealed in her speak up once more. It won't be too hard, little one. How do you suggest we do that? She asked out loud, causing Hana to narrow her eyes at what she and her Bijou were discussing. Simple. This is what you do. An hour later. It took Roichi some time, but after conversing with an all too eager Hana about it, they managed to perform Son Goku's plan off. Roichi had finished rigging up the small hut and packing away the essentials for both her and Hana. Now all she was doing was waiting. That didn't take too long, as Hana had re-entered the hut with two unconscious kunoichi over her shoulders that had similar heights to them. Coincidentally, it was the same two that held them down to kneel in front of the Tsuchikage earlier, so this was some good revenge on their part. Hana placed them both on the floor and looked to Roki. Ready? Roichi asked her. Hana nodded, and the two began to strip out of their clothes and armor. For Roichi, her body was almost a smooth, light skin tone where even her scars from the obedience seal had healed up. Her body was slightly curvaceous with a round rear that would make any man turn his head. Hana, even though for the most part her body was always covered, had a slightly tan skin tone to her body. She was surprisingly just as well endowed as Roichi was, though slightly muscular as well. Her hair was surprisingly short as well, only reaching the back of her neck, and it had a burnt orange color to it as well. Their bodies soon laid bare, as they even removed their undergarments for this plan. After that, they stripped the two in front of them and meticulously placed their own outfits on the two to make it look convincing enough. All right. Roichi spoke first as she looked down to the two. Let's tie them up and put them over there. She pointed towards the center of the hut where the table was, and Hana nodded. They did so, and in quick order, ensuring that the two would not wake any time soon to really make this convincing. When they did that, the two nodded to one another and left the hut through the door with their belongings. They locked it from the outside and set the bombs off, causing a large fire to flare up, gaining the attention of the villagers inside the walls of IWA. The two left rather quickly afterwards, making sure to cover their tracks in the process. As they were leaving, they heard the alarms blare in the distance behind them and how chaotic everything was inside the village. As a little insurance policy to keep their escape guaranteed, Hana placed a few bombs in random locations in the village to go off at the same time as the ones inside the hut. It was only a few places, but it would cause enough pandemonium for them to escape. After running for hours, the two stopped, realizing they were at a beach of some kind. Okay. Roichi started as she spotted a small house off in the distance with some clothes hanging on a clothesline. That was when she also noticed that they were still naked. It was better this way to not have anything on to affiliate themselves with IWA and also to keep their scent relatively cold to any trackers, but it was still oddly embarrassing in a way. Let's get some clothes and figure out where we go from there. Hana nodded, and they were about to go before she stopped them. Actually, Roichi, yeah? She stopped and looked to her friends. Shouldn't you do something about your hair? Hana started. It is far too noticeable and distinguishable, especially if any IWA kunoichi come this way somehow. Hana had a point. Unlike her, Roichi never had her face covered, meaning everyone in IWA knew what she looked like. Her hair would have to be the first thing to change since there weren't many redheads in the world now. I'll deal with that. Roichi started but stopped once her stomach growled along with Hana's. After we get some clothes and food in our bellies. I'm starving. And with that, the two went into this small village near the waves to start a new life and train with their biju. Kiri. Inside of a hospital room laid the two girls from earlier that collapsed on the street. The auburn-haired girl had been in their room for some time now, as she wanted to make sure that the two were just fine now. She sighed as she was about to fall asleep herself. But that all changed when the shorter of the two girls suddenly sat up, completely awake and surprised by her surroundings. The auburn-haired girl fell out of her seat right as that happened. Whoa! The shorter girl spoke more to herself, as she had just had a conversation with her bijou spirit while unconscious. She let out a sigh as she looked to where her friend lay and saw that she was all right. Before she could even do anything though, she heard a groan on the floor. Huh! Ow, my head! The new voice spoke up as she stood rubbing the back of her head. Who are you? The girl asked as she had seen this auburn-haired girl before but never communicated with her. The girl looked to the one in the bed with slight smirk and stood tall. The name's Meitaremi, she said proudly. I saw you and your friend collapse in the street and rushed you both to the hospital. You okay? The girl could tell that Mei was being genuine in her question. Not many others would think the same way about Jinuriki, especially here in Kiri. Smirking herself as now she had a goal in mind thanks to her bijou, the girl looked up to Mei. I'm fine. Thank you for Mei, not many would have done what you did. Mei smiled to her. It was no problem. The girl nodded, then turned when she heard her friend stir awake. The dark-haired girl sat up and stretched out her arms as she yawned. May stifled a laugh, as did the first girl, but that all changed once the dark-haired one turned to them with that disheveled look on her face. Both girls couldn't help themselves and began to laugh hard at the way the girl looked. Well, that's just rude, Yaguri. She spoke up while crossing her arms in a pouty way. Sorry, Yuta. The now named Yaguri spoke in between laughs at Yuta's face. May regained her composure long enough to address the two while wiping a tear from her eye. So, are you two okay now? I mean, you seem like you are, but earlier. She was quickly cut off by Yaguri. It's okay, May. We're fine. In fact, she looked over to a smirking Yuta, knowing the dark-haired girl had a similar conversation with her bijou. I'd say we are so much better than fine now. May simply raised a brow at that statement, but was happy nonetheless. Taki, the girl with mint hair, awoke inside the large cocoon with a slight start. She looked around for a moment before hearing a comforting voice in her mind. It is all right, little larva. The voice was soothing and calmed the girl down fast. You know what you must do, Fu. The girl, now named Fu, breathed in deeply as she closed her eyes. After taking a few breaths, she opened them once more, resolve deep in her orange eyes. I do. Without wasting any time, she began to dig. It would take a while, but soon, she would be free of these people and free to live her own life. Kumo. Right now, it was in a frenzy as she had quickly rushed her little sister to a hospital after she and her teammate had collapsed in pain on the street. She, along with another blonde girl named Samui, who was carrying the two-tailed Jinuriki, raced along to get the two there as quickly as possible. I didn't know what had caused her sister to collapse like that, but she had a sinking feeling it had something to do with her seal. Before she passed out, it was able to see her seal glowing slightly right before they passed out. A said to herself as she took a quick glance down to her sister. You and Yujito had better be alright after this. As if Kami was listening in on her thoughts, B woke up suddenly along with Yujito, stopping both A and Samui in their tracks. Yujito! Samui yelled out as she hugged the now conscious blonde tightly. A little too tightly, Samui. She started in a gasp as she tapped the concerned blonde on the shoulder. Can't breathe. Can't breathe. Samui didn't let go for a short time, causing Yujito to pass out, comically. Once Samui realized this, she started acting hysterical, trying to wake her friend up. As this was going on, A set B down, and steadied her for a moment as the younger of the two held her head for a moment. B? A started in what was commonly referred to by their friends as overprotective big sister mode. Are you okay? What happened? Is there anything you need? B sighed as she was bombarded by question after question only to hear the eight tails muttering something to herself about the QB. B didn't quite understand her as her sister was still asking too many questions right then and there. But whatever had happened to her and Yujito must have had something to do with the nine tails. Whatever it was, B decided that she and Yujito would have to become stronger so when whatever happens does happen involving the QB, they were ready. Right when Minato, Kushina and Tsunade opened the door and locked eyes with the three children inside, they all were completely taken aback by what they saw. Naruto's form when he was unconscious was one thing, but to see him wide awake, and even moving his tail around was a whole other story entirely. Kushina was the first to react as she rushed inside and immediately hugged her three children as tight as she could. Oh my babies! She nearly sobbed out in pure joy seeing the three awake and uninjured by the looks of them. Hi, Mother. Natsumi answered with a big smile as she hugged Kushina back. Mother, look at Naruto. She managed to wiggle free of Kushina's grip just as Minato and Tsunade had entered the room and shut the door behind them. Aoki and Naruto also broke away from their mother, and it was then that Naruto showed the three women that he could move his tail freely. It brought a wide smile to the three children as all Naruto did was move his tail to wrap around his mother, much to Kushina's subtle shock. Minato and Tsunade were surprised by how easy Naruto was able to move his newly acquired tail despite just waking up now. Big brother's tail is so fluffy and soft. Aoki spoke with absolute wonder in her eyes as she snuggled back into Naruto's new appendage. Kushina felt it with her own hand and was genuinely surprised herself. Wow, it really is soft. Minato and Tsunade couldn't help themselves and went in fully after closing the door. They each went over and felt Naruto's new additions to his body, mainly his tail, his new fox ears, longer and smoother hair, and even his muscles through the gown. It was amazing how different he felt than before. Naruto, Minato started in a worried tone, getting her son's attention. How do you feel right now, ticklish? He answered since everyone was touching various parts of his body. This caused everyone to begin chuckling, which turned to full-blown laughter. To the adults in the room, they were happy that at least he was okay now with no apparent changes to his psyche. Everything was fine until Naruto actually stopped to ask them a question. Oh, Mom, what happened to Miss Aika? She was next to me when I blacked out. I hope she's okay. Minato took a sharp breath, as she really wanted to have that woman executed for even looking in her son's general direction. But the fact that Naruto was worried for her caused some concern. The fact that an IWA ninja was able to infiltrate the village so easily and kidnap anyone posed a major flaw in their security. Either that, or someone must have given her intel in some form or fashion. For now, Minato didn't know. With a sigh, Minato answered her son. Right now she is being held in the TI department to be interrogated on how she was able to infiltrate our village. After that, I plan on having her executed for what she did to you. Naruto went wide-eyed out of fear at what his mom just said. But she told me who told her to kidnap me. Who? Kushina asked, curious just who her victims would be for daring to pay someone to take her son away from her. It was those same guys from last time who had me sent down river that one time. Naruto answered her, hoping that this helps Aika in some way. Miss Aika isn't a bad person, Mom. She doesn't deserve to die. Minato was both furious and intrigued. Furious at the fact those same men that got away with sending her son down a river in a box and got off with a slap on the wrist were the same ones who sent an assassin to kill Naruto this time around. Civilian council be damned, she was going to make those men suffer and make sure that not even the dust of their bones would be found by anyone. On the other hand, she was intrigued by the fact that her son didn't want the assassin punished in any way despite what she did to him. Her son truly was too good for this world sometimes, and she knew it. With a seemingly tired sigh, Minato relented as she looked into her son's determined eyes. All right, Naruto, we won't execute her. All three children smiled brightly at their mom's words. But Minato quickly got their attention once more. I will be placing her under arrest for a time. Can't really allow her to go unpunished for kidnapping you, Naruto. She gave her kids a bright smile as they each were overjoyed by what they heard. Naruto had told his sisters a bit about Aika and the two were excited to get to meet her. Kushina stood near her lover and smiled herself. She let out a breath she didn't even know she was holding as she was just happy that everything seemed somewhat back to normal with her children. She knew exactly who were the ones her son spoke of that hired the woman, and she would personally ensure that they would get exactly what's coming to them. The one thing that most people seem to understand except for those men: never mess with an Uzumaki's family. Especially a mother's children. Tsunade was rather impressed by what she heard. She half expected Minato to deny her son's request and have this IWA assassin killed without a moment's hesitation. Seems that cute face the boy has is just too damn strong for any woman to resist. While she watched the family interact with each other and even mess with Naruto's tail and ears, Tsunade was rather interested in seeing just what other changes happened to the boy. She would have to figure that out later as she didn't want to ruin the mood of the room. Hours later, Naruto's room. It took much effort on the Hokage's part, along with trying not to disrupt the seal on Naruto's chest. But Minato was able to form a seal on her son's back that changed his appearance. He looked exactly like he did before the incident, and was genuinely surprised and a little saddened at the loss of his fluffy tail. After that, Tsunade did a checkup on Naruto and found that he was as healthy as an ox. When asked by Kushina and Minato in private if there was anything else that happened with their son, Tsunade surmised that Naruto may have much higher chakra coils than anybody in the whole village. She wouldn't fully know until she gets Jiraiya's perverted ass back here to check on that seal. After that little checkup, the Namikaze Uzumaki family went back home, ensuring any concerned kunoichi that everything was fine for now. Minato had even assured her last student Kasumi that everything was fine for now despite what the copy kunoichi saw earlier. Now that everything had somewhat settled down, Naruto was laying in his own bed now, fast asleep once more. After everything that has happened tonight, All the young boy wanted to do was sleep now. As he lay in his bed once more, hopefully this time without any interruptions to his sleep, he didn't realize a faint red glow resonating off of his body. He continued to lay there though, completely oblivious to what was happening right now. As quietly as possible, his door opened and closed as two small figures made their way inside. The two went towards the bed the blonde-haired boy lay in, and stood there for but a moment. Then, without wasting a single second as the red glow seemed to intensify to a slight degree, both figures crawled into the bed with the boy. They both snuggled into his warm form as the red glow cascaded over their forms as well. The glow seemed to die down as the three were sound asleep. News of what happened was kept to a minimum in order to avoid a panic in the village. All anyone knew was that Naruto was kidnapped by a rogue ninja and nearly killed. As usual, the kunoichis of the village were concerned for his safety, but happy that he was alright in the end. Most males were disappointed that the brat survived, but a few were happy all the same. As promised by Minato, Aika was put in a cell where she would stay indefinitely for a time. Minato wanted the names of every man that hired her to kidnap and then kill her son, and as Kami is her witness, she would make those men pay. As for Naruto, Natsumi and Aoki, after that night, Naruto found his sisters in his room and snuggled up to him. He didn't mind as he enjoyed being around his sisters all the time, but something felt a little off about this. For some reason he felt a strong bond with them both and an even stronger urge to become strong for them. It was odd at first, and just kept getting weirder as the days went on, but Kurama actually explained a few things to him. Since his sisters held both her yin and yang halves and he held her soul, of course there would be a strong connection for the three. Naruto told his parents this information, and they were both stunned that the Kyuubi actually communicated to him. It never spoke to Kushina before, so why was it doing it now? Both parents put that information away for later and told Naruto never to tell anyone else outside of the family about the Kyuubi speaking to him. When asked why, Minato and Kushina informed him that some people may take that the wrong way and try to hurt him for one reason or another. Naruto heeded their words and decided not to speak of it to anyone else. After that night, Tsunade had run more and more tests on Naruto. Since Jiraiya was off doing whatever it was that she did, the pervert, Tsunade was essentially on her own in this matter. She had checked Naruto's blood and even had to check on his chakra to get a better understanding of what exactly has happened to him. To her surprise, he was able to mold chakra just like his sisters or any female in the village could. This opened so many questions for the blonde doctor that she would stay up in order to understand this whole situation in detail. If Naruto was able to mold chakra like they could, then that would mean he could become a ninja with proper training. That thought was fresh within her mind as she knew that word would spread like wildfire if he were to enter the academy in the next year and a half along with his sister Aoki, while Natsumi would be there next month. While she knew how the female populace would most likely react to the fact that Naruto would be entering the academy to become a ninja, it was the male populace that she had her doubts and suspicions on. Whatever were to happen in the next month would drastically alter the course of the ninja world forever. It would be best to keep those Naruto and his sisters together though, as she had no idea just what that seal would do to the three siblings. Just where was that perverted toad when Tsunade needed her? Suna. It has been a hectic and nerve-shattering few days for the desert village. Ever since that night, Gaara had yet to wake up from her slumber, and it was driving everyone to near panic. Every kunoichi in the village knew of the sand demon within the child, and what the ramifications would be if she slept. Everyone was ready to have to fight a massive sand demon that towered over their tallest of buildings and could leave their home buried like the tombs of old, yet it never came. For the past 3 days all Gaara did was sleep peacefully in her own bed, clutching her teddy bear and smiling. The Kazekage, Gaara's mother, had no idea why this was happening, or more specifically why nothing was happening. She had the seal checked by multiple seal experts within the village, that being only 4 at the time, and they all said the exact same thing each time they examined it. The seal is fixed. The Kazekage, Riza, was perplexed by this news as it didn't make any sense at all. How could the seal be fixed like that? Who fixed it? Did they do so to control her daughter? Too many questions for her right now as she sat bedside of her youngest child, watching her breathe in and out slowly. This whole situation had driven the council up the walls and they were all but demanding that this may be the best opportunity to finally be rid of the demon once and for all. Had this been any other time beforehand, Riza would have agreed to the order. The sands that had constantly protected her daughter were doing no such thing, and she was laying here, absolutely defenseless for the first time in years. It would be so easy to finally be rid of a problem that has been plaguing the village for years now. So why couldn't she go through with it? Riza, for all intents and purposes, hated Gaara after the death of her wife birthing said child. That hatred only intensified when the sand demon was sealed inside of her. In Riza's mind, it was Gaara that had taken away the one person in this village that she truly loved away, and that thought stuck with her for years as she ignored, neglected, and even ordered the attempted assassinations upon her daughter. If any one of them could succeed in ending the girl's life, then that meant to Riza that she had avenged her late wife and gotten rid of that monster from the village. It was such a simple thing to her, yet now, as she finally sees her daughter for the first time in almost 2 years, sleeping peacefully with the stuffed bear that her wife had picked out for her when she was carrying the child, Riza couldn't do it. She couldn't give the order. She couldn't agree with the council. She couldn't even look at her youngest daughter without tears threatening to leave her eyes from all she had done to her over the years. Her wife would have been disappointed in her, and that visage of the woman scowling at her every time she saw Gaara only brought true clarity to her mind. The anger, the grief, the rage, and the anguish she felt from losing her wife had finally washed away like her tears streaming from her face. It was finally time to stop and become the mother her wife entrusted her to be when she passed on to the next life. "Mom?" A small and familiar voice spoke from behind Riza. The woman wiped away her tears and brushed her long auburn hair to the side as she turned to see her other 2 daughters. The small 7-year-old blonde stood at the doorway with her 6-year-old, brown-haired sister standing behind her. The 2 watched as their mom sat there at their youngest sister's bedside and saw something that was very foreign to them both. She was smiling at them. It was a small smile, yes, but the amount of times the 2 had seen her smile after their mother's death could be counted on one hand. It was a very rare occurrence to see Riza smile to any of her children. Riza motioned for the 2 to come over to her, and they did, albeit a bit hesitantly. The 2 knew just how dangerous Gaara could be, as evident by the times that Sand had attacked them on occasion. But once they saw the sight of their younger sister sleeping with such a gentle look to her, that fear had faded. Temari, the short blonde, had stood by the bed near Riza while Kankuro, the younger of the 2, had been picked up by Riza and placed on her lap. Riza hadn't done this to either of her children in such a long time that the feeling of Kankuro sitting on her lap was almost a completely new experience for her. "Mom," Temari started once more as she looked to Gaara with a wonder in her eyes. This had been the first time she had ever seen the redhead asleep before, and it was strange for the girl. "Is Gaara all right?" Riza couldn't help but chuckle under her breath at the girl's question. True, they had never seen Gaara like this before, and in all honesty neither had she. But that didn't mean anything was wrong now. Not anymore, at least. "Yes, sweetheart," Riza answered her with a small smile still. "Gaara will be just fine now. I just know it." This seemed to appease the blonde as she also smiled at her mom's words. Kankuro smiled too as she also watched their youngest sister sleeping. 1.5 years later, Konoha. It had been an interesting time in Konoha over the past year plus. True to her word, Minato found and properly punished those responsible for hiring Aika to kill her son. How she was able to keep this all out of the civilian council's gaze, you ask? By having those 5 men suffer some horrible accidents all around the village. They weren't dead per se, but after what Anko and a few unbelieved by Nico had done to them, they might as well be. Now they'll think twice before doing something as extreme as hiring a ninja from an enemy village. Speaking of, Aika was kept in a cell for a time. Minato kept her promise to Naruto not to punish her too severely for what she did to him despite the numerous protests from some of the kunoichi in the village. The most vocal of the bunch were Anko, Nico, and Kasumi. They believed that Aika should be killed for her actions, but Naruto was actually the one to calm them down, claiming that she was very emotional by the time everyone showed up to confront her. That seemed to at least calm them down for now. It was later revealed that Aika had a few traits of a fox as well once she began to sprout ears and a tail as well in her cell. Minato theorized that being on the seal with Naruto at the time must have been the reason for the changes to her. Naruto also explained to both his parents that the Kyuubi told him of the new connection Aika had with him, and how she would listen to him. Seeing no other choice, Minato decided to put her on probation and have her join Umbu as Fox, after placing the same seal on her to hide her additions. Then there was the time for both Naruto and Aoki to enter the academy, and while one was excited, the other was a little apprehensive, that being Naruto. While it was true that he wanted to learn how to be a ninja, he was also a bit intimidated at that thought as well. He was already at a disadvantage being a male in an all-female academy, and he would surely be the talk of the town in time. Which he was very fast. The moment he and Aoki walked into the academy on the first day after Kushina wished them both luck, all eyes turned straight to the blonde boy entering the academy. Now at first, since both Naruto and Aoki were walking hand in hand inside, everyone assumed that Naruto was just walking her in to comfort her. But that thought changed once he entered the same room with her and sat down at one of the empty spots. It did not take long for all the girls in the classroom along with the teacher and assistant teacher to stare at the boy as he sat there with his twin sister. Things were awkward for the blonde as he went through the day with all eyes on him for the majority of the lessons. Iruka and Mayim, the teacher and assistant respectfully, couldn't really focus too well as they watched the boy intently throughout the lessons. It was only when the two decided to have a small, practical display of chakra control for the class was when things became strange. All the girls in the class were taught and told how to release a small amount of chakra in their palms. This teaching method was brought in by Minato in order to show the future generation the importance of chakra control at an early age. Everyone in the class was in awe at Mizuki's display as she flared a small amount of chakra into her hand in the shape of small ball. Not necessarily the Hokage's prize jutsu, the Rasengan, but enough to demonstrate proper control of chakra. All the girls were tasked with releasing a small amount of their chakra after the demonstration. For some, it was very difficult as they had never used their chakra before, while the clan heirs were able to get it down fairly quickly. Speaking of which, the clan heirs were all in this class this year. The first to achieve the task was, of course, Satsuki Uchiha of the Uchiha clan. Being taught by her older sister, Izumi, in proper and simple control helped in this exercise. Next was Hinata Hyuga of the Hyuga clan. Since her clan specialized in knowing the flow of chakra within the body, simply releasing a small amount took little effort from her. She was proud of herself at the moment, despite knowing that her older cousin, Niji, was still leagues ahead of her. Next was Shika Nara of the Nara clan. As lazy as she was, no one could deny her intelligence was on par with her mother on the council even at such a young age. Forming chakra in her hands was child's play. After her was Shika's friend Chuko Akamichi of the Akamichi clan. It merely took her a few attempts and a helpful hint from Shika to get it down. Once Chuko finished, Ino Yamanaka of the Yamanaka clan was next to succeed. She then bragged about it to her friend Sakura Haruno. Speaking of which, Sakura Haruno was the next to pull it off as she actually did have perfect chakra control. She was also the first one among the class not to be in a clan to successfully form chakra in her palm, earning several odd looks from the other non-clan girls in the room. Next up was Shina Aburame of the Aburame clan. Not much was really said about her, as she kept to herself most of the time and only spoke unless spoken to. Up next was Kisa Inuzuka of the Inuzuka clan. It took her some time, but soon enough she got it, and instantly began to brag about how great she was, much to everyone's ire. She even looked over to Naruto with a smug look on her face. With them out of the way, it was time for Aoki to step up. She didn't like the way the Inuzuka had looked to her brother in that smug way and decided to show off just a bit. Her mom had been teaching her about chakra control for years now, and it seemed that now it would pay off. With a deep breath, Aoki let her chakra flare out in her palm, catching everyone's attention and surprise. The chakra formed into a much larger ball than even the teaching assistant, Mayim, was able to make, and was almost entirely solid blue by the time she finished. Aoki took another breath, and the ball dispersed back into her palm. She opened her eyes to the stunned girls and an amazed twin brother, and couldn't help but smirk. She looked straight at Kisa, and this time gave her a smug look. After that display, most of the other girls in the room who had yet to form a small ball of chakra were discouraged from trying, but Naruto was not. If anything, he was even more determined to succeed and become a ninja. Focusing on his palm and the chakra within himself, Naruto began to do the exact same thing as the other girls in the room. While everyone was still focused on what Aoki just did, not many took notice of Naruto and what he was doing. The boy began to focus as he knew only what his mom, his mother, and what Kurama told him about chakra. He knew his was different than everyone else in the world, but that wasn't going to stop him from achieving his goals. Slowly but surely, he began to feel his chakra flow out and into his palm. It was strange for him. His palm felt heavy for some reason, and he could hear many loud gasps in the room. Opening his eyes, Naruto saw exactly why everyone was wide-eyed and speechless. The chakra in his palm was black and was almost the size of a beach ball. It wasn't like his sister's, which started off wild and then calmed down. His was calm and stayed that way. He stopped the flow, and the ball vanished from sight. He looked around and saw that all eyes were on him once more, and all he could do at that point was smile sheepishly and scratch the back of his head. This was going to be one hell of a time in the village now. Naruto could do nothing but smile sheepishly and scratch the back of his head as he saw the looks of pure shock and awe on everyone's faces. He had no idea what just happened or why his chakra was black like that, but he had a suspicion that Kurama was behind it somehow. The looks from the class made him feel uncomfortable as even his sister was staring at him with widened eyes. All he could do was slowly back up to his seat and sit down while Irika tried to get the class back on track. Even she was in awe at what this boy had just done, and everyone in the class had a varying degree of reactions afterwards. After class, the entire day was just uncomfortable for our blonde hero, as he was mainly stared at the entire day. When he went to lunch with his sister, everyone was staring at him. Word had reached the entire academy that Naruto, only son of the Hokage, had large chakra reserves enough to be a ninja, and that his chakra was black. The fact that he was allowed to attend the academy was already shocking enough. The black chakra was a whole other story that Minato heard rather quickly. She read the reports sent in by both Irika and Mayim and already had her theories on the matter. Naruto and Aoki had left class and proceeded to make their way home when they were confronted by more than a few girls from class. Chief among them was Satsuki, as she had practically marched over towards him with a hard scowl. Also with her were Sakura, Shika, Chuko, Ino, Shina and Kisa with her dog resting in her jacket. Far off behind a tree was the shy Hinata watching from a distance. Naruto saw Satsuki marching towards him and instantly felt uncomfortable once more. Out of everyone in the class, she was the one who kept watching him no matter what he did. It was awkward for the boy as this girl looked to be analyzing his every move. Hi. Naruto started with a wave as Satsuki stopped in front of him. I want you to spar against me. Satsuki just outright said in a no-nonsense tone. This caught everyone off guard as this was only the first day of the academy, and someone was already challenging someone to a sparring match now. Though it shouldn't have been too surprising as Satsuki is a rather competitive type of girl. She most likely sees Naruto as a new challenge to her to test her strength against. She clenched her fist as she prepared for his eager response, same as the other girls behind her who were also eager to see just how skilled the son of their village leader was. So imagine their surprise when Naruto simply scratched the back of his head and answered her challenge. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to decline. He smiled at her while he said that to her. What? All the tension inside her vanished once he said that. Why not? Don't tell me you're too scared to fight a girl, she said in a slightly smug way to get a rise out of him. It worked on Aoki, who was about to tell her off, but that was when her brother intervened. It's not like that. I just know that right now I'm nowhere near anyone else's level. Yeah, I was able to summon that large amount of chakra, but I have no idea how to maintain it as long as the rest of you can. His answer surprised the group. I also haven't trained in any sort of fighting style yet, so it really would just be a one-sided match. He smiled once more. How about when we're close to graduating that we pick this up again? He held his hand out to her. Deal? Satsuki was taken aback by his words as he knew it wouldn't be a fair fight if he accepted then and there. She had always assumed that the male population trained to fight in order to impress the women of the village and show that they were strong enough to take care of themselves. Satsuki sighed as she could see that Naruto may be an exception. She reached her hand out and shook his. It was at that moment that she actually looked at Naruto and saw his warm smile and felt his firm grip in her hand. She blushed at that smile as he seemed to genuinely mean what he said and what he meant. She quickly let go of his hand and turned so none of the others could see her blush. Alright. She stuttered a bit, catching them off guard for a moment. But once we get ready to graduate, I'll be waiting for you. With that, Satsuki quickly left without so much as a glance back towards them. She raced away and was out of sight in moments. Naruto figured this was a perfect opportunity to gain insight on just how he should train now that he had a goal in mind for the academy. Looking to the rest of the girls and his sister, Naruto steeled his nerves and asked them, "Is it okay if we can all train together sometime?" This gained everyone's attention as even Hinata practically ran up to join in the conversation. "I know I have a lot to learn, and I was hoping if I could get some help for the time we'll all be in the academy. Unless you all have other important things to do, I understand it." "Yes." They all said in unison as this would be a perfect opportunity for the other girls to know the only male ninja in their village better. For Aoki, any time spent with her brother would always be a great time. She could only imagine how jealous Natsumi would be when she heard this news. 4 years later, it was only a few days until graduation now, and much has changed in these 4 years. For one, word of Naruto being able to use chakra like any other kunoichi spread through the village like wildfire. Everyone wanted to know how this was possible, including the daimyo. Minato had to explain to the masses and her country's leader that due to unforeseen circumstances, Naruto now houses a part of the Kyuubi no Kitsune within him. You would think the response to be negative and hostile, and you would be right for the most part. Most of the civilian council wanted to have Naruto executed for the Fox's crimes, and some of the civilian population wanted to know just how large of a part did the boy house. Minato kept the explanation vague, but assured everyone that herself as well as her master, Jiraiya, have everything under control. Speaking of, once Jiraiya made it back to Konoha upon her former student's request, she was beyond shocked at what she saw on her godson. The ears were one thing, the whisker marks another, but the tail was something else entirely. For one, it was so soft and fluffy that she actually had an idea on how to make money off of selling pillows of the same softness. Kushina wasn't the biggest fan of this as she spent the next 5 minutes flinging the white-haired perverted woman around their backyard. Once she recovered, Jiraiya examined the seal on Naruto and was perplexed. While the seal that was originally on Kushina and now on the girls were similar in design as they were Jinchuriki before and now respectively, Naruto's seal was completely different. For one, it wasn't the standard seal for a Jinchuriki as it didn't seal away the biju in question like all the others. Instead, it was sealed that was acting almost like a transmitter of some kind, one that was subtly sending out a signal to another seal. In this instance, towards the two who also had a part of Kyuubi sealed within them. It explained why Aoki and Natsumi were a little clingy towards their brother in a way as his seal was calling out to them in a strange way. When asked if the Kyuubi was trying to steal her powers back from Natsumi and Aoki, Naruto said that she said something about potential mates, and saw just how quickly his parents and godparent reacted. Minato and Kushina went pale as a ghost at hearing that while Jiraiya had stars in her eyes as she quickly grabbed her notebook and started writing notes for what she called an incestuous masterpiece. Naruto and Aoki had no idea what she meant and left it at that while Natsumi checked on their parents, asking them what mates were. They quickly said it was something they weren't old enough to know about. Things started to change in those 4 years. After checking the seal and seeing that the Kyuubi wasn't trying to escape even though it was perfectly capable of doing so, Jiraiya decided to test the theory out. She left the village again and decided to check other Jinchuriki to see if anything had changed with them, or if they were also experiencing something similar to Natsumi and Aoki. Safe to say that she was shocked to discover the One-Tails was sane now and sleeping despite various reports stating otherwise. The 4, 5 and 7 tails have either died or fled. The 3rd and 6th tails seem just fine as do the 2nd and 8th. Gaining said information took her a few years to find regarding the 4th, 5th and 7th. Back in the village, Aika was doing well in her role as Umbu once her probation was up. She would regularly visit Naruto, and would instinctually want to teach him everything she knew. At first, Minato and Kushina wanted her to have no part in their son's life, but after some convincing from Naruto that he would learn even more about being a ninja and more about defending himself, they relented. Aika taught him some basic chakra control and a minor fighting style that would help with his strikes and even takedowns. It was simple and not too hard for the boy to learn, and even Naoki and Natsumi got involved as they got along with Aika fairly well, especially her training. Speaking of training, Naruto learned many things in these 4 years. He learned from Aika and Kushina on chakra control. Kasumi had taught him a few basic techniques to deceive enemy ninja like henge and substitution. Most of the girls in his class and even the teacher on occasions would teach him the basic academy fighting styles. Tsunade had known how much he wanted to learn medical techniques and treatments, so she made him a deal. She would teach him the basics now and chakra-based techniques when he graduates from the academy, then make him her pseudo-apprentice when he reached Chunin. Naruto agreed and began learning the basics of medicine and the human body. Minato, when she wasn't swamped with her duties, taught all 3 of her children even more advanced chakra control by having them learn the tree-walking technique. To say that they were amazed was an understatement. While Naruto was enjoying his time in the academy and all the new things he was learning, there was also the things that Kurama taught him. How to sharpen his senses using chakra and focus on other aspects of nature. The sounds, smells, and even tastes of everything around him. He would learn by meditating and could tell when others were around now based off of their unique chakra or their smell. It was strange though the first time he tried this and wondered what a certain smell was coming off of some of his teachers. Mainly Kasumi, Aika and the girls in his class. Kurama said it was arousal and that he would learn more when he was older and acquired mates. He shrugged at that and continued to meditate. It was now the day before the graduation exams and Naruto stood opposite of Satsuki Uchiha. The two stood at the ready in the ring out back for taijutsu events and simply stared each other down. These past 4 years had been fruitful for everyone in the class as most got to know Naruto and Aoki well enough and trained with them as well. The only one who kept her distance from the two was actually Satsuki, as she wanted the fight between them to be even. She had trained rigorously with her older sister Izumi to learn as much of their family's techniques as possible. She was ready to face off against the only male ninja in their class and in the entire village as she stood there in tight black leggings and a loose blue shirt with the Uchiha logo on the back. She had white armbands on and blue sandals. Naruto had changed in those 4 years as well. He had gained a healthy amount of muscle for a 12-year-old. He was taller than most of the girls in his class by a few inches. His golden blonde hair was much smoother now and kept from his eyes with a black headband. He wore black cargo pants and black sandals and had on only a tight red shirt with the Uzumaki seal on the back in white. He wore black, fingerless gloves and looked ready for this long-awaited duel. Iruka and Mayum were off to the side watching while their students also waited in anticipation. These two hadn't changed much though they were interested in seeing just how well Naruto would do against someone like Satsuki. They also knew that there were many others who would be watching this fight from afar. The clan heirs watched with bated breath as the two simply stood there for a while. Aoki was nervous for her brother despite knowing just how strong he had gotten in these 4 years. She stood an inch shorter than her twin. Her red hair was now at shoulder length and slightly spiked at the ends. She wore tight gray shorts and had on a black and red jacket that was too big for her. It was Naruto's as he didn't want his birthday gift to get destroyed in this duel. She wore a white shirt underneath with the Uzumaki swirl in black on the front. She had grown in the past 4 years as she had started to develop in all the right areas, though she wasn't as big as her older sister yet. Standing next to her was Hinata Hyuga as she wore a baggy jacket that covered her developing figure and had the eye of the Hyuga sewn on the front. Under it was a dark blue, skin-tight suit that provided flexibility and fluidity. She was nervous as she knew just how serious Satsuki could be when she was serious about proving her strength. She still remembered the one time they sparred years ago, and the thought of it still brought her phantom pains sometimes. "Do you think Naruto-kun will be alright, Aoki-san?" Hinata asked in a worried tone. "I wouldn't worry too much, Hinata-chan." Kisa started as she placed her elbow on the Hyuga's shoulder. She wore her usual gray jacket and had Akamaru inside like usual. Under the jacket, she wore a white shirt that had her clan's fawn symbol sewn into the sides and black pants with a red trim on the sides. Her sandals were black. "Naruto-kun's got this. Hell, he's way stronger than some of us, so it should be his match. I would not underestimate the Uchiha, especially Satsuki Uchiha, Kisa." Shina spoke up from behind the Inuzuka. She wore her regular outfit of her high-collared jacket and tan pants, But the only thing different was that the green shirt she wore underneath had a symbol of a beetle sewn on the back in black. What you mean, Shina? Kisa asked her in an irritated tone. Satsuki has been looking forward to this day for years now, and she's been training non-stop all for this duel. Shina explained. She will not force herself to yield or be defeated. It is her way, unfortunately, to prove that she is the strongest among our generation. I just hope they don't go overboard with this fight. Sakura voiced her concern as the two dropped into stance. She had changed since meeting Naruto and Aoki, and started taking her training seriously after Naruto taught her a few medical tricks he learned from Tsunade. She began to actually train more and gain some muscle and strength as well as development in her body. Right now, she wore her red shirt that hugged her body well with a sakura tree stitched on the back and a pair of black shorts underneath that stopped at her mid-thigh. If they do, then the teachers will put a stop to it. Shika spoke up as she was also focused on this duel. She didn't change too much aside from training with her friends a bit more than sleeping. She wore a gray, short jacket over a mesh top that was covered by a white crop top with a cloud stitched in black on the side, and standard dark gray pants. Hopefully that won't need to happen, Chuko said after taking some chips from her bag. She wore her usual outfit of a green jacket over a white shirt. The jacket had the Akamichi kanji sewn on the back in red, and she also had a white scarf with the same stitching on both ends. She wore gray shorts. It shouldn't, Ino answered as she looked on as the two waited for the other to make a move. After seeing her best friend taking training seriously and hearing why, Ino had also started to train harder, gaining muscle and developing well in the process. She wore a purple top kanji for the Yamanaka clan sewn on the front, and a purple skirt over tight, white shorts. Naruto, seeing that neither were going to move first, decided to make the first move. He rushed over towards Satsuki with speeds closer to a chunin and threw a straight left. Satsuki dodged and went for a jab herself. Naruto blocked it, and went for a counter right only for her to parry the move with her free hand and send a kick his way with her right leg. Naruto raised his left knee to block the kick but didn't have enough time to block the incoming left cross. Using his size advantage, he grabbed her by the shirt, planted his right leg down firmly, placed his still raised left leg to her hip to throw off her balance, and leaned back. Satsuki was taken aback as she was being forced forward after losing balance. Naruto rolled back and launched her back in a judo takedown, something she clearly did not plan for. Satsuki gritted her teeth as she landed back first on the ground but wasn't done yet. She kicked up and leapt away before Naruto to deliver a sweep kick to her. She landed not too far off at the edge of the ring. I'm impressed, Naruto, she said with a slight smirk on her face. Didn't think you would be this good at all, really. If you're trying to get under my skin with taunts, won't work. Naruto replied as he saw her chuckle a bit under her breath. Good to know. She got back in stance as she seemed to bring her hands together. Then let's see how good you really are. Faster than most in the crowd could keep up with, Satsuki went through several hand signs before stopping and taking a deep breath. Naruto saw exactly what she did and performed a few hand signs himself. Katan, Fireball Jutsu, Futo, Great Breakthrough Jutsu. She launched a large fireball at Naruto, while he launched a small tornado of wind at her attack. Everyone was panicking as wind was never the counter for fire, but instead an enhancement for it. Satsuki was confused by such a move and wondered just what he was thinking. The teachers were getting ready to step in to stop the attacks from clashing, as were a few in the far trees. But that was when the torrent of wind did something unexpected. It changed shape and color. The small tornado turned into a funnel and the color went from a clear white to pitch black. The moment the fireball hit it, the funnel pointed out towards the tree line farthest away from them and went into the air. Everyone was so shocked by this that they didn't even see Naruto move quickly towards Satsuki. Even she was distracted by the spectacle as the fire safely dispersed in the air that by the time she turned back towards Naruto, all she saw was a fist in front of her. Naruto smirked as he gently pushed the still shocked girl by the forehead out of the ring and onto her butt. I guess that makes me the winner, Satsuki-chan, Naruto said with a smirk as he offered her his hand. She looked at him for a moment before taking the hand and being helped up. What did you do back there? She wasn't the only one as the rest of the class rushed over for an explanation as well. Naruto could do nothing but laugh sheepishly and scratch the back of his head. Well, I knew that you would eventually use a katan technique, and I haven't learned any Suiton ones yet, so I figured if I can't extinguish the flame, then I could redirect it for a distraction. It was just luck for me that you were so close to the edge of the ring. The girls were impressed with that as they kept on bombarding him with questions all the while Aoki was scolding him for doing something so dangerous. She did hand him his jacket back though. Both Irika and Mayum sighed in relief that nothing too dangerous or over the top happened, as did the ones hiding away. After regaining their composure, the two broke everything up and informed their students of the test tomorrow and to be back to the academy bright and early. Everyone agreed and left the school, though Naruto was still bombarded with questions by his friends as they left to get something to eat. Hokage's office. Harumi Sarutobi had been impressed with Naruto's intelligence towards the situation, as she had brought her crystal ball so they could watch the duel. Right now, Minato and Kushina were watching and were proud of their son for his display. Also in the room were Kasumi Hitaki, Anko Mitarashi, Might Gaya, Danza Shimura, Tsunade and Jiraiya. Very impressive that boy is. Danza spoke from her spot on the couch. Though I've never seen that black chakra used like that before. Same here, Kasumi started as she watched the boy walk away from the school with his friends. Do you think it has anything to do with the Kyuubi-sensei? All eyes were on Minato as she placed her hand on her chin in a thinking pose of sorts. I don't know, but so far Naruto has been truthful with us regarding his interactions with the Kyuubi. Let's just keep an eye on him for now. You don't think that he'll lose control like other Jinchuriki have, do you? Jiraiya asked her. No telling so far. Minato answered. Natsumi and Aoki haven't had any problems learning to control the yin and yang halves of Kyuubi's chakra, and Naruto has had no issues with the soul. But this black chakra still worries me. Lady Kushina, Anko started respectfully, you used to house the fox before. Has this ever happened to you? This black chakra? Kushina shook her head. No. Red, yes. That was the Kyuubi's chakra, but it was never black before. Same with Mito. Maybe it's because he only houses the soul instead of the chakra? Harumi started as she sat next to her oldest friend. I doubt it. If that were the case, then why would neither Kushina nor my grandmother ever had that issue when their chakra had to be cut off to give birth? Tsunade explained. That's when the seal is at its weakest and the only time for the fox to escape. Yet if it had that black chakra, it could have used it to do so, seal or no seal. What do you think we should do, Lady Hokage? Gaia asked her superior, as she could tell that this black chakra was most unyouthful indeed. For now, we wait and see just what else Naruto is capable of. Minato looked to Tsunade. We all know he is graduating with the clan heirs, so you take care of your own deal with him, Tsunade. The busted blonde nodded with a smirk. Minato looked towards Kasumi and her expression turned slightly serious. I need you to train him and Aoki as well, Kasumi. Kasumi nodded. Would it be alright if I also had Satsuki and Sakura on my team, sensei? Your reason? For one, I believe that the two of them, Naruto and Satsuki, have developed a rivalry of some sort, and will use that to push each other further and further. She explained. As for Sakura, I believe that she needs proper direction, and she sees learning medical jutsu as a way to do so. So, she learns it from Naruto as he learns it from Tsunade. Minato finished Kasumi's thought. Yes, sensei. Kasumi answers. Alright then. Minato nods. Approved. Now that the show is over, you are all dismissed. Everyone aside from Kushina nodded and began to leave as Harumi took her crystal ball back, no doubt to peep on some of the youth, much to Danza's dismay. So, Kushina started as she sat on her wife's lap and saw the look in her blue eyes. What are really thinking right now? I'm worried for our son. Minato started as she leaned her head onto Kushina's chest. He'll be going out into the world that we never wanted him to be in. It'll be dangerous for him, you know. I know. Kushina started as she lifted Minato's head and planted a searing to her lips. When she departed, she looked right into her eyes. Have faith in him and all of our children, Minato. They're smart enough to know when they're in over their heads and strong enough to take care of themselves. Minato smiled a bit. How do you always know what to say to calm my nerves? Simple. Kushina kissed her again, then smirked. I'm your wife. Minato grinned. Vacate my office for the next hour. Kushina shook her head. Scratch that, make those 2 hours. Minato went and kissed Kushina passionately. The Umbu quickly left, and saw the silencing seal placed over the now locked door. While 3 of the Umbu were blushing under their mask, Fox was simply shaking her head. Not again. She sighed out. Kiri. It took some time and many trials and tribulations, but she had done it. After proving herself against opponent after opponent and mission after mission, Yaguri had finally been seen as a candidate for the Mizukage position. Since the current one was too sick to continue their duties, the council had been scrambling to find a successor, but unbeknownst to them, the old Mizukage had already seen Yaguri's potential. After that day 4 years ago, both Yaguri and Yuta had drastically changed. At first it was subtle, but then it became apparent that the two were steadily getting stronger every day. It all came to a head once a Jounin decided to try and pick a fight with the two, only to be brought to the hospital with not only several broken bones, but also a few burn marks as well, courtesy of one Meiturami. It wouldn't have been an issue had it not been for the fact that the 3 of them were still genin of the same cell at the time. After that incident, the 2 Jinchuriki were heavily monitored, as it made no sense to the council for the 2 to be so strong now. That went about as well as you'd expect, as the cell excelled in every mission, and were quickly promoted to Chunin in record time. After this, they took on missions deemed too challenging to anyone else, including the village's own Umbu. Their strategies and tactics earned them respect from their fellow ninja in time, as they were a successful team that got the job done every time. The council didn't like it, but Yaguri had proven time and time again that she was an incredible and capable leader every time she was in charge of her team, or any other team for that matter. It became even more noticeable once she became a Jounin and had her own team of genin, one of them being a young girl named Haku with an ice bloodline. Yuta was later promoted to Jounin but opted to not become a sensei to any genin. Her reasoning: she just didn't want to. Mei was the last to be promoted to Jounin, and decided to rub it in one of her other friends' face. That other friend was none other than Zabuza, one of the remaining 7 swords women of the mist. Let's just say that Mei was mainly just running away, laughing at Zabuza's attempts to slash her with her large blade. After everything was all said and done, it took a combined, Herculean effort of both Yaguri and Yuta to stop Zabuza from bisecting their friend. Now, 4 years after that day when the 2 Jinchuriki collapsed and became truly in sync with their Biju, it was time for Yaguri to prove herself and become the Mizukage that she had always dreamed she could be, with the full support of not only her 2 best friends and teammates, but also the remaining 7 swordswomen, her own cell who were now Chunin, and also the current Mizukage. Yaguri had one last trial to go through. The council. Yaguri Karatachi, one of the councilwomen, started as they all sat in a large room. You have been selected as a candidate for the title of the Yandere Mizukage. Do you accept? Yaguri didn't even hesitate as she stood in the center of the room, standing tall and composed. Yes. Then you know what must be done in order to become the Mizukage. I do. Yaguri nodded as she spoke in a solemn tone. Very well. Another councilwoman spoke as she turned towards one of the guards. Bring her in. One of the doors opened to reveal a woman with a bag over her head, a collar with a chain attached to it, and completely stripped of all her clothing. Her hands were tied behind her back using a strong chakra-suppressing material. She struggled as she was dragged along by 2 women in cloaks and brought to her knees in front of Yaguri, who held an impassive look. This was always the difficult part to proving your worth as a candidate to being Mizukage. A trial and most likely execution of someone who has committed a crime seen as serious by the council. It was to test one's resolve to do what was best for the village, no matter what their morals were or their stance on the severity of the crime. Everyone knew the person most likely committed a simple crime, but that was not the point. It was barbaric, but they lived in trying and unsure times. The council wanted to see if Yaguri had the strength and will to be a leader no matter how little the crime was. Yaguri sighed to herself as she removed the bag over the girl's head and was floored by her appearance. Tan skin, mint-colored hair that had seen better days, and orange eyes that held a fire to them as he looked up to Yaguri in defiance. The trial will now commence for this thief from outside our village. Another councilwoman started. Yaguri Karatachi, judge this outsider properly and determine her fate. The moment that Yaguri locked eyes with this girl, something clicked in both of them. Something they could feel in their respective Biju. They were both the same. At that moment, Yaguri knew that she couldn't kill her fellow Jinuriki. Had this been any other random outsider, she would hate herself for it, but it would ensure that she became Mizukage and changed everything. This girl looked like she had been put through it now that Yaguri got a better look at her. Her hair was matted in dirt. She looked to have bruises and shallow cuts along her body. She had clearly been running from something, as her feet seemed ragged and worn out. Well? A councilwoman started, impatiently. We are waiting, Yaguri Karatachi. With a sigh, Yaguri looked at the girl and began. This trial will commence. The perpetrator is guilty of stealing food from a vendor after illegally entering the village of Kirigakure no Sato. She held her hands behind her back. You are to be executed immediately. Before I carry out the sentencing, I must ask, she looked the girl straight in the eyes, what is your name and number? The girl raised a brow briefly before seeing Yaguri nod to her and giving a stern look. Something told her that she could trust this person in this situation, especially if they were also a fellow Jinuriki. My name is Fu, and my number is 7. Yaguri widened her eyes briefly before nodding. Mine's Yaguri Karatachi. She continued before doing some sort of sign with her hands. And my number is 3. Suddenly, the two women holding Fu down threw their cloaks off to reveal both Zabuza and Mei. What is the meaning of this? A councilwoman shouted angrily. Yaguri turned towards the council with that same stern look in her eyes as she looked towards every member of the council. Simple. She turned towards one of the doors and it opened to reveal Yuta along with several Ambu as they surrounded and began to bind the council. This is the future of our village. Fu was untied and unbound by Mei while also given the cloak to cover herself. She looked to Yaguri as the girl walked past the screaming council and to a sickly woman in a wheelchair handing her the hat of a Hokage. Yaguri nodded to her and placed the hat onto herself. Fu was almost captivated by this girl taking control like this. It was something she had recently started doing after running away from Taki years ago and hopping from place to place. But this was the first time she had seen someone like this Yaguri person before. You see, Honorable Council, Yaguri continued as she sat in a vacant chair reserved for the Mizukage herself, my predecessor had already made it official long before I arrived here. What? A councilwoman yelled out as they were all kneeling down in the center of the room in a line. This trial will now commence for the numerous laws broken by the former members of the Council of Kirigakure no Saturday. Yaguri started as it was Haku who handed her a folder that had multiple files within. Before the council could protest at this wild accusation, Yaguri continued. Extortion. Money laundering. Kidnapping. Wrongful imprisonment. Banishment of innocent and loyal kunoichi. Human experimentation on wrongfully convicted civilians. Under-the-table dealings with both the Wagakure no Sato as well as the rogue kunoichi of Kanehigakure no Sato, Orochimaru. High treason. Theft of property. Theft of land. Wrongful executions. Fu looked on from the side next to Mei with widened eyes as even she knew just one of those would be rights for execution anywhere else. The fact that these 12 people had committed so many of them showed her that there were people in the world that were just too cruel. So many people were suffering because of these 12 women, and it seemed that it was Yaguri that would make them pay for it. You are all to be executed swiftly and without mercy. Yaguri finished as she closed the file. Before any of you even bother, it took years and cost us all a fortune to gather this evidence against you all. So find comfort that it was at least a true challenge to bring you madness to an end. She looked at Zabuza and nodded to the woman. Before the former councilwomen could utter a single word, Zabuza had cleaved all their heads from their bodies in one swift motion. With that now over, Yaguri sighed as she knew there would be more work to do from now on. The council had done more damage to the village than even the previous Mizukage thought. It would be hard work, but Yaguri was prepared to do everything she could to fix her home. She wouldn't be alone in it either as she had Yuta, Mei, Zabuza and Haku with her to do so. She looked to Fu and she smiled and nodded as Fu also returned the gesture. Oh yes, this was definitely the future of Kirigakure no Sato. Today was the day that Naruto and Aoki would be assigned to a cell to begin their careers as ninjas. Both were excited to know just who their teammates would be and if it were possible if they were assigned to the same team. It would be amazing if they were, but they kept their expectations low so as not to be disappointed. They had pestered their mother all day yesterday about which teams they would be assigned to, but Minato kept her mouth shut the entire time. The two were a bit irritated but decided to just go with the flow for now. The two left their home and raced across the rooftops to reach the school faster. On the way, they saw both Kisa and Hinata on the street and waved to them. The two did the same and then rushed up a building to join the twins in their rush to start their ninja careers. "Hey Naruto, Aoki." Kisa spoke up with a wide grin while Hinata waved to them both. "Hey girls." Aoki replied with a wave. "Are you two ready for team assignments?" Naruto asked them both. "Hell yeah!" Kisa answered while Akamaru popped up from her hoodie on her front and started barking excitedly. "And so is Akamaru. I'm really looking forward to it," Hinata said with a gentle smile to the twins. They reached the school and noticed both Satsuki and her older sister, Izumi, waiting for the twins. While Izumi was all smiles at the two, Satsuki had her arms folded in front of her and was looking away from them, or more specifically, from Naruto. While the two didn't know Izumi that well, they knew that she was one of the youngest Anbu members there is and that she was the pride of the Uchiha clan. She waved to the two of them while nudging her little sister to do the same, which she reluctantly did, before turning her attention to Naruto. "Naruto," she started with a nod once they were near the two sisters. "It's good to see you today. I wanted to personally thank you for yesterday." "Huh?" Naruto started while tilting his head slightly. "But I never ran into you yesterday." Izumi chuckled as she glanced at Satsuki to see her blushing a bit while also scowling slightly. "Actually, Naruto, I was there to watch your duel with Satsuki. Only I was far off in the treelines so as not to get involved or seen. So that was that unfamiliar scent Akamaru told me about after the fight." Kisa stepped in, earning a chuckle from the Anbu member. "I guess I still haven't figured out how to trick a Ninken's sharp sense of smell yet. So why were there then?" Aoki asked her. "Simple." She placed her hand on Satsuki's head to ruffle her hair, much to her annoyance. "I wanted to watch the fight between you two to see if you were as skilled as I was led to believe, and I am very glad you are, Naruto." "Thank you?" Naruto bowed slightly at the compliment. "But why are you glad about that?" Izumi's smile widened as she took her hand off Satsuki's head and pushed her a little closer to Naruto. "Because that makes you worthy of marrying Satsuki." The silence was palpable as Naruto turned a ghostly white. Kisa and Akamaru went wide-eyed with amusement, and both Aoki and Hinata were blushing madly, though the one most embarrassed by this was Satsuki as her entire face was a bright red now as she looked away from Naruto's gaze. Izumi was all smiles as she watched the reactions of the kids in front of her. She knew how her sister would react to this and a vague idea of how Naruto would react, but seeing both Hinata and surprisingly enough Aoki turn red like that was a shock to her. This was an interesting development, and would need to be looked at further, but that was for later, as the bell began to ring. "Well then," Izumi started as she walked off, "you kids have a good team assignments day." She waved and vanished in a swirl of leaves. It was an awkward silence as the five, plus a dog, made it to their classroom. The second they entered, Sakura noticed that Naruto was walking like a zombie while Kisa was trying desperately to hold in her laughter. It was strange but not as strange as seeing both Satsuki, Aoki and Hinata blushing up a storm as they sat in their respective seats around Naruto. She also noticed that Satsuki was sitting a little closer to Naruto than usual, which apparently caused Aoki to do the same. "Okay, what's up?" Sakura asked as she couldn't take the awkward silence and looks from them anymore. At that moment Kisa burst out laughing, which got everyone's attention as she hysterically proclaimed, "Since Naruto beat Satsuki yesterday, she's gotta marry him." While Kisa continued laughing, everyone else in the room had different reactions to this news. For both Shika and Shuko were slightly surprised to hear this as they knew there was some sort of tradition the Uchiha clan had to marry strong ninja outside of their clan to produce strong offspring. Though, that tradition was usually done between two women, not a man and woman. Shika actually believed that it would make Satsuki exempt from this tradition since Naruto is a male. A male with a black chakra. A male who was now a strong genin ninja. Shina raised a brow behind her sunglasses as she didn't think that something like this would happen so soon in any of their careers. All she could do was shrug at this news and wish the two a very long and healthy marriage. Ino was seeing stars, or more precisely, wedding bells and beautiful wedding dresses and a gorgeous venue for the two. She was already planning how the flowers would be arranged, and what their colors should be. To her, this was some of the best news she had heard all week. Sakura went wide-eyed at this news as she couldn't believe what she had just heard. She could only imagine how both Hinata and Aoki were feeling since they did both, at different times, confide in her of their feelings for the boy. It was an odd spot to be in for the pink-haired girl, as she could only hope that nothing stranger would happen today. The rest of the class were either joining Kisa and laughing or shocked by the news. Then there was a small part that was jealous of the Uchiha for scoring with the blonde. This was the sight that both Irika and Mayim walked into. They watched for a bit as half the class was in a fit of laughter, and the other half were either blushing or looking shocked about something. Well, this is different, Mayim said to Irika. The Chunin sighed as she used her big head jutsu to shut the class up. All right, she started as she looked to the class. It's time for team assignments. Each team will be composed of 3 genin and their sensei, with a special exception of Team 7, which is always given 4 of the very best genin. The class waited in anticipation for who their teammates and sensei would be. All right, we'll start with Team 1. Mayim started to list off the members of each team and their senseis. While this was going on, Naruto was still reeling from the news that he would have to marry Satsuki Uchiha. Surely this couldn't be a real thing he would have to go through with, right? He could almost hear his parents jumping for joy at the prospect of their son being courted with someone of Satsuki's status and standings. It was awkward to hear the news from Izumi, and the thought of it all made Naruto feel very uncomfortable. Granted, he had nothing against Satsuki. She is strong-minded, confident, easy to talk to when you get to know her, strong, attractive, and very attractive actually. Naruto shook his head to rid his mind of those thoughts as he glanced over to Satsuki for a brief moment. Bad idea as he started to notice her figure developing at a very nice place. Naruto knew of the female body rather well and would keep his thoughts and other parts of himself under control whenever he was around the girls in his class or any of the women around his home. But now ever since he hit 12, his hormones were starting to get to him. That, and the giant fox woman within his soul wreaking havoc on him now just for the fun of it. Before Naruto could react anymore to any impure thoughts and urges, he heard the next team and began to pale once more. Team 7 Mayim started. The 4 members are Satsuki Uchiha, Aoki Uzumaki Namikaze, Sakura Haruno, and Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Naruto paled at hearing this news while both Satsuki and Aoki nearly jumped for joy at the last member of their team. Sakura was happy in a way as she was beginning to learn some useful medical tricks from Naruto, so this worked out for her. Kisa once again couldn't contain her laughter as she was joined by Chuko. Shina simply shook her head at the placement of Naruto with his betrothed Satsuki. Shika chuckled a bit as she saw Naruto's face pale a bit. Ino was over the moon on the new team. Hinata was disappointed that it wasn't her on his team. Mayim continued with the team assignments. Your sensei will be Kasumi Hatake. At least their sensei was someone that Naruto and Aoki knew. While Naruto was having his world turned upside down at the team placements, both his and Aoki's older sister Natsumi was on a different kind of headache. Earlier in the day, Minato had her take on a team to go on a simple bandit mission near the border of Wind Country. It seemed simple enough as the group was mainly comprised of men, and possibly a Rouge Kunoichi as the boss of the whole operation. The team was informed to take out the bandits and find this Kunoichi as the trade from both Suna and Konoha were being affected by these people. Simple, right? So much for that. Much like her younger siblings, Natsumi had grown as well along with being promoted to Chunin in the time Naruto and Aoki were in the academy. She had let her blonde hair grow and kept it tied in a ponytail. She was taller than her mother, Kushina, by a few inches and definitely looked more like a mirror image of her mom, Minato, aside from her own lavender eyes. She wore a simple white shirt with the Uzumaki symbol stitched into the back with black thread, courtesy of her little brother, and tight, black umbu pants and black sandals. She wore the standard Chunin vest that hid her impressive bust for a 15-year-old. She also wore fingerless gloves with the right one being black and the left being white. The team that she was in charge of was none other than Team Gaia sans Might Gaia, of course. The eccentric sensei was tasked with a S-rank mission along with Kasumi and Aika the day before. First was, of course, Gaia's little mini-me, Rocklita. She wore the same green spandex as her sensei and had the same hairstyle as well along with bushy eyebrows. She had on orange leg warmers that hid her weights and bandaged up her hands all the way down near her elbows. The biggest difference between her and her sensei was the orange scarf she had tied around her neck. It was a normal scarf that could use some care as there were tears and cuts and scruffs to it, but Lita kept it close at all times for some reason not even her sensei knew of. Next to her was Tenten, the resident weapons specialist. She wore her standard Chinese-style outfit equipped with a special scroll that housed many of her weapons within. Out of the three on Team Gaia, she was not a heavy hitter and instead focused on supporting the team. Last was of course the prodigy of the Hyuga clan, Noa Hyuga. She was wearing a tan, short-sleeved coat to cover her impressive bust and black biker shorts that showed off her thighs and rear end well. She also had wrappings around her left arm and leg. Her long black hair was tied at the end and kept out of her face with her headband. Right now, the group of four were making their way to the border through the trees. It was a fairly standard trip that would take only a few hours to get there. So, Miss Natsumi, Lita started in a respectful tone, what can we expect from these unyouthful group once we encounter them? From the reports, these bandits mainly consist of men and one kunoichi. Natsumi answered. We don't know much about her other than she leads this group to disrupt caravans of supplies that go to and from Suna. Does that mean we may have issues with Suna? Tenten asked her with mild concern in her voice. I highly doubt that. Noa interjected. It's not like Suna would do something as foolish as to get in our way. Don't be so sure of that, Noa. Natsumi spoke up as she stopped on a branch followed by the rest. Why? Noa asked her with a raised but furrowed brow. Fate has already decided how this mission will go. That is certain. Natsumi huffed at that, gaining their undivided attention as they could see a fairly large group of bandits waiting at the border and several tents there as well. Fate is a concept that holds very little standing in this life, Noa. She turned towards the genin. Life has this strange and vague ability to change people in ways that even they don't realize until it's practically smacking you square in the face. Something my mother taught me. She turned back to the bandits and searched for the kunoichi. Speaking of which, Noa, you stay here and use your Byakugan to find that kunoichi along with giving us a number on these bandits. All right. Noa stuttered a bit, a little shaken from that statement Natsumi said to her. She activated her Byakugan and began searching. While she's doing that, Natsumi looked to the other two. Tenten, I want you to set up a perimeter of traps and choke points. Anyone that gets to those choke points, Lita, you take them down as quickly as possible. I don't want any of these bandits to get away. Both Tenten and Lita nodded as they left to do their tasks. Found her. Noa spoke as she raised a brow. But there's something else approaching her. What's wrong? Something is slowly entering her tent and surrounding it completely. Ah! Noa shut her Byakugan off and grabbed at her eyes in pain. Noa! Natsumi placed a hand on her back to comfort her. A faint, red glow came from her hand as the pain in Noa's eyes started to fade. What happened? I think someone is already here. Noa looked up at her with strained expression. Suddenly, the tent that had the rogue kunoichi twisted with sand and quickly engulfed it, swallowing the whole tent. There was a loud scream followed by an even louder squishing sound as blood seeped from the sand. The men saw this and began to panic as their leader was killed so suddenly, and they began to run away in different directions. Unfortunately for them, they just as easily set off the traps Tenten had set up, cutting their forces down by half. Lita took out several and was later joined by a strange woman in a cat suit and makeup using chakra strings to control a puppet. Tenten was using her weapons for range and was suddenly joined by a blonde on a giant fan that was using wind jutsu. Natsumi and Noa jumped down to join in and they all quickly ended the bandits' lives with no issue. A few minutes after they finished off the last bandit, a tall, tan woman wearing a Suna Jonin uniform and had half of her face covered appeared. Good job, you three. She started as the blonde and the one in the catsuit walked over to her. She looked around for a brief moment as Natsumi was doing the same. Where's Gaara? Present. A voice spoke up behind the woman that caused her to jump ever so slightly. This got the other two to burst out laughing at their sensei's reaction, while the third voice simply giggled and stepped over to the other two. You've gotta admit, Baki-sensei, that was funny. The one in the catsuit said through gasp of air as she couldn't stop laughing. The now named Baki regained her composure and got their attention. All right. It seems this mission is a success. Well done, you three. It seems Suna was also sick of this group disrupting their supply lines. Natsumi spoke as she and her team walked up to the Suna group. You would be correct by that statement. Baki started as she walked forward and introduced herself with a handshake. You can call me Baki, and this my team. Natsumi accepted her and nodded. Natsumi Uzumaki Namikaze, and this is my team. Wait a minute, the blonde started with wide eyes. You're the daughter of Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, right? This caught the rest of her team's attention. Natsumi scratched the back of her head sheepishly and chuckled a bit. She is my mother, yes, but please don't let that change how we can just speak normally to each other. Baki breathed a sigh of relief as they parted and decided to introduce her team properly. Well, if that is the case, then allow me to introduce my team. She pointed towards the catsuit one first and making her way down. This is Kankuro, Temari, and Gaara, also known as the Sand Siblings. The three bowed lightly to the group, but for Natsumi, her attention was focused solely on Gaara as she felt something familiar about her. It was a slight tug at first, but now that they were standing right in front of each other, it was more of a pull than anything. It was almost similar to how she felt when around her siblings, but nowhere near as strong as that. That pull to be closer to them than anyone else in the room, or more specifically, to her brother, was sometimes too great for her to bear. She quickly shook those thoughts from her mind and began introducing her own team. She's almost like me, isn't she? Gaara asked Shikaku as she could feel that vague aura just like that night all those years ago. It's similar, kid, but not exactly like before. Shikaku could tell that this girl was a container like Gaara was, but she was different. She only had part of one of her sisters, so who had the other parts? I would advise being a little cautious of this one kid. Why? Aren't we the same? Gaara asked as she looked to Natsumi intently. Not exactly. I'll explain when we get back home. Gaara agreed with this just as Baki and Natsumi finished discussing things and began to bid each other farewells. As the groups went their separate ways, both Natsumi and Gaara couldn't help but feel that this would not be the last time they saw each other. It's been a few weeks since Natsumi's encounter with the Sand Siblings, and things were going rather well for our young blonde hero. Or at least it would if it wasn't for these D-rank missions he and his team were constantly doing. While he didn't mind helping the people in the village by doing various tasks, these missions felt more like glorified chores that they were paid for than anything. Aoki was also very irritated with these missions, as was Satsuki. Sakura, on the other hand, was fine with doing simple tasks while learning from both their sensei, Kasumi, in the ways of a kunoichi, and from Naruto with medical techniques and jutsus. For the past few weeks, Kasumi had been teaching her team the basics and slowly upping it to more practical and advanced techniques. From standard chakra control like balancing a leaf to the more advanced forms like climbing trees using only their chakra in their feet. Sakura got this down very easily while both Satsuki and Naruto struggled at first. Aoki was able to get it fairly quickly after a few attempts. Kasumi also figured out what everyone's affinities were, and that was when things took a drastic turn. In order to assess someone's affinity, they needed to use a specialized paper and apply their chakra to it. The way the paper responds represents a different affinity. If it becomes soggy and wet, that was water. If it crinkled up, that was lightning. If it was cut, that meant wind. Turns to dust, that meant earth. If it burns, that meant fire. For Satsuki, it was obvious that fire was one of her affinities. But what surprised Kasumi was that she also had an affinity for lightning as well, since the paper also crinkled. It was the same as Kasumi's, so teaching Satsuki some of her own personal techniques would be simple. For Sakura, the paper turned to dirt and was partially wet as well. Earth and water, an interesting combination in Kasumi's book and a great defensive, and even offensive combination. Teaching her would be fun in the older woman's opinion. Aoki's paper was interesting as it split into two sections. One side began to burn while the other also crinkled up. This surprised everyone as it's pretty rare for someone to have three affinities at such a young age. Kasumi would have to get some help from Asumi in terms of the wind affinity, but should be fine with the other two. It was Naruto's turn that all three girls and their sensei were most interested in. In fact, so was both Minato and Kushina and a vast majority of the Leaf Village kunoichi. Right now, both Minato and Kushina were watching Team 7 through the crystal ball along with Danza, Harumi, and the rest of the jonin that were assigned a team. They were impressed with Aoki's 3 affinities, but it was Naruto who was the main attraction here as everyone waited with bated breath. Naruto held the paper in his hands and released his unique chakra into it, and everyone watching were not disappointed. The second his chakra touched the paper, it exploded with that same black chakra as before. While everyone was in awe at what they were seeing, Naruto had his eyes focused on the paper despite that explosion of power. The paper was completely engulfed in the dark chakra and turned completely black with some smoke coming off of the edges. The paper then split into 3 pieces as one of them became wet. But then the unexpected happened to that piece as it disappeared completely like it was never there to begin with. Another piece glowed a white color before exploding into white flames and falling to the ground. The last piece was interesting as it crinkled up and also crumbled into a black dust. When it was all over, the explosion of power was gone, and everyone looked to Naruto in amazement. Naruto, on the other hand, just looked to his team and scratched the back of his head sheepishly. That was a little over a week ago, and both Minato and her master Jiraiya were trying to figure out just what that darkness and white light meant. Even Harumi joined in on the search, only for them to come up with nothing in particular. There was a theory that it could be darkness and light affinities, but there was not enough information to confirm that for now. For now, they knew Naruto had wind, lightning, fire, water and earth along with those 2 unknown ones, and this made his potential even greater than even some of their own prodigies like Izumi, or even Minato herself. Kasumi began teaching them all with some help from some of her friends. Right now, though, Team 7 was standing in front of Minato, ready for their first C-ranked mission. While Kushina had her concerns, Minato assured her that everything would be fine. At least she hoped so. Alright Team 7, Minato started as she handed Kasumi a scroll describing the mission. This is your first C-rank mission, and it's fairly simple. You'll be escorting a bridge builder by the name of Tazuna back to his home called Wave Village. You'll also be keeping him safe until he finishes the bridge he's constructing. Will we be seeing bandits on this mission, Lady Hokage? Kasumi asked as something felt off about this mission. Most likely, she answered as she leaned back in her chair. It shouldn't be too difficult for any of you, but always be prepared just in case. Kasumi got the subtle message her former sensei was giving them and nodded. Tazuna was brought in, and the old man was immediately suspicious of the blonde boy in the group with a headband on. Who's he supposed to be, a mascot? Naruto just narrowed his eyes in frustration as he figured this would be the reaction he would get from people outside of the village. He just had to deal with it for now and keep his cool. I assure you, Tazuna, Minato started, releasing a little key to get her point across about insulting her son, he is more than capable of protecting you. She said this to him with a simple smile as Tazuna was shaking from what he felt. Oh, okay. That was all he could say. All right. Minato started once more as she eased up her ki. Prepare for a long mission and be ready to leave in 1 hour. Dismissed. They all nodded, and Kasumi told her team and Tazuna to meet her at the gate in an hour. They all agreed and left, leaving the 2 alone in the room. Something's not right here, Sensei. I know. Minato answered and leaned on her desk. While this mission is clearly more than a simple C-rank, this is of the utmost importance, Kasumi. Why is that? Because I just received a report from Danza's root ninja that IWA has lost their 2 Jinuriki. Kasumi's one eye went wide. But how? She stuttered out. I thought their Kage kept them on a very tight leash from the rumors I've heard. Minato sighed. I know, but from what they've heard is that the 2 died in a fire in their own home some years ago. As a matter of fact, Minato stood up. When they told me the date, it reminded me of something. Kasumi watched her walk to the large window and look out to see her 2 children quickly making their way back home. What? It was the same day Naruto gained that black chakra and Kurama's soul. You don't think? Natsumi ran into another Jinchuriki on her last mission with Gaia's team. Minato interrupted. She could feel something with the girl from Suna named Gara. Is she okay, sensei? Kasumi asked with concern in her voice. She is, but when she told me that, I remembered a few reports of that Jinchuriki being an unstable killing machine, yet when Natsumi described her, she was anything but. Minato turned to Kasumi, back to the 2 from IWA. Apparently the 2 might have faked their deaths and escaped somewhere. An area they could possibly be in is Wave. What do you need me to do, sensei? Kasumi asked with a nod as she understood what was going on. Keep your eyes peeled for the two if they are in wave. Minato answered as she went back to her chair to sit down. And also, keep Naruto away from them if they are there. Naruto? She raised a brow. We don't know why or even if this is relevant, but both Aoki and Natsumi are much closer to Naruto now that he has the soul of Kurama. We don't know if that applies to any other Jinchuriki, but I do not want to find out. She looked Kasumi in the eye and spoke with true authority in her voice. This is a general order. If the two Jinchuriki from IWA are in fact in wave, do not approach them. Understood? Kasumi nodded. Dismissed. Kasumi used Shunshin to leave the room in a swirl of leaves and could only hope that things would turn out alright going forward. Thanks for watching this video. You really enjoy this video. Like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow Stringed Man for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.